This whole world of modern art is wild. I've been diving into it like for the past year now, pretty deep. And I got inspired by that Lost Leonardo documentary, which was fascinating. And then I recently have been reading up on all of the history of like covert operations during the Cold War to fund the modern art world. And your documentary is fascinating. So explain how you got into that whole world and what your book and the documentary are about.
Sure. Remind me to tell you about the CIA thing, because I'm doing a big project on a Pollock from that program.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'll tell you about that. But I was doing, I started as a kind of a cub reporter for Japanese TV in the 90s. And during that time, the Japanese economy had a bubble economy. And so there was just money everywhere. Real estate was going crazy in central Tokyo. And it turned out that, like lots of bubbles, there was a lot of shady business going on. And one of the things that was happening, the Japanese had just started getting really interested in European art. They had all this money. They were able to start buying European art that they hadn't really been able to afford or weren't that interested in. And it turns out that they were getting a lot of fake art, because they were relatively unsophisticated buyers. And so you had these giant real estate deals in Tokyo underwritten by art, $50 million work of art. A lot of it was fake, right? And so we started looking into this and they said, hey, there's this guy called Tony Tetro, who's this huge art forger in America. He's in jail now, but when he gets out, go look him up. And so I did some investigation and I kind of found a lead and I ended up meeting Tony. And it was kind of funny because we met at this kind of swanky place in Newport. And he had all these people around, he was smoking cigars. Everybody knew him. He had a bunch of cronies around him. He was talking about all his Ferraris and stuff. But the reality was that he was broke on his ass and he was living in a motel. His room was literally next door to a Chinese restaurant, and he walked across the street, because he was really kind of down and out. But somehow we had hit it off, and within a couple of months, like he gave me pretty much all of his stuff related to art. He just gave me boxes of stuff. He was like, "I like you, I like what you're doing, and knock yourself out." So that's really how it started, and then over the years. I would hear more and more and more about Tony. He'd kind of open up more and more about everything that happened. And, it ended up that I knew him for like 20 something years. And so it was funny because he would start to tell a story and he just go, Giampiero, you tell it. You know better than I do. I kind of knew everything, knew where all the bodies were buried and all that stuff. So, fast forward to 2019, 2017 really, he started doing some work for this, crazy, coked up billionaire guy named James Stunt. He started doing some work for him. And, he started telling me about it. And I was like, well, this is weird. Who's this guy? What's he doing? And Tony said, well, I'm doing like 10 or 12 things for him. He wants to put him in this mansion. He had the biggest mansion in California. It used to be
James Stunt.
It used to be called Candyland. And Aaron Spelling, the producer, built this house for his wife, Candy. And it was this huge mega mansion. And Stunt married the heiress of the Formula One fortune, Bernie Eccleston. He married the daughter, and so he got all this money. Wow. They bought this house, and now he calls it Stunt Manor, because he was a little bit of a, narcissist. So anyway, he, as far as Tony's concerned, he wants this artwork, Picasso, a Van Dyke, a this, a that, for his house. Well, these guys get to be friends, and, they talk at night. Stunt's up all night, doing drugs and stuff. He's awake, calls Tony in LA because Stunt at this time is back in London, calls Tony in LA, and they talk about art, cars, women, whatever. And so Stunt says, hey, I want you to come to London. Well, Tony goes to London, and he shows up, and Stunt is kind of on a bender. So he's up all night and then he sleeps all day. So Tony's just hanging around by himself. And I mean, Stunt's nowhere to be seen. So Tony is going to the British Museum with the bodyguards, take him to the pub and like showing him a good time because he doesn't know what else to do. Anyway, he comes down one day and he's at the table by himself and there are these papers there. And he's like, what's this? Because he's got nothing better to do. Nobody's there. He's by himself. He starts looking at him, and on these papers, which are some kind of legal contract, some kind of contract that has something to do with a place called Dumfries House, he sees paintings. And the thing with Tony is these paintings are unique individual paintings. They're not copies. So 99% of people think that forgers copy paintings. They don't copy paintings because if you copied a painting, you'd just be like, it's fake. The real one's at MoMA, you know?
Right.
So it's a work that an artist might have done, maybe in the style of, for a certain time period, using the color palette and subjects of a certain time, right? So it's an individual new painting that you create sort of a backstory. Here's why this exists.
Right.
Here's how this just showed up out of nowhere, like the Lost Leonardo, for example, right? Here's an excuse for why this exists.
Yeah, and isn't it with typical pieces of art like this that there's a historical chain of custody that's written about, and you can corroborate it with other literature that goes back into however long ago.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. So there are a lot of people who can paint perfectly. Okay, you can go get a perfect copy of something. There's a village in China that everybody there works making exact copies of master works. Wow. So you can get that, right? However, what Tony's genius was that he is extremely passionate about the backstory of the art, the details, the minutia. So there's a great example, which I talk about in the book, and in a 17th or let's say 18th century expert book about Rembrandt engravings, there's a footnote, page 78. There's a little footnote and it says, hey, so-and-so said that there was a drawing of this, and so-and-so says that there's not a drawing of this. Nobody's sure. Well, that's really all you need to now go, hey, I'm going to make that maybe drawing exist. I'm going to bring it into being. So, of course, you have to execute it perfectly with all the right materials and all the right technique and the period and everything. Wow. Yeah. So then now you've created a new piece that never existed or maybe existed but is lost, and you have the back history supporting why it exists.
Yeah,
right?
But how does he know that somebody doesn't have that already existing in like a private collection?
I mean, it's a risk you take, but you assume it's been 350 years. If it's going to show up, it would have shown up, So Tony, going back to the loan that he saw, so he could see that these paintings on the contracts, they're mine. They're absolutely mine. These are new paintings that I made. They're my subject. They're mine. Why are they on this document that is going to Dumfries House, some royal Scottish thing? So he goes, this sounds a little fishy to me. He takes out his cell phone and takes 3 pictures, right? When he gets back to LA, he goes, hey, Giampiero, I was just in London and this funny thing happened. Take a look at these pictures. What do you think? And I look at him and I go, very fishy. They're loans to Dumfries House. And Tony had told me it was like Prince Andrew or something like that of the British royal family. But Dumfries House.
So this billionaire guy on a bender was loaning money.
Was loaning artworks.
Loaning artwork.
To Prince Charles into his royal collection. And so I go, well, the fuck is going on here? And he had mentioned something to Tony. He had said something about like, I'm going to do a loan and I'm going to get all this money, but I'm not going to have to pay it back.
So he explained this whole thing to Tony.
He didn't explain. He just kind of mentioned, he just kind of briefly mentioned like, this thing is going to kind of happen and I could make a bunch of money on it.
Got it.
And Tony's like, well, it doesn't make any sense to me and whatever. So he shows it to me and he goes, what do you think? And I go, okay, well, Dumfries House is Prince Charles, the future King of England's headquarters of his charitable of his charitable foundation. It's in Scotland. He's got all this art in it and everything. And I'm like, okay, well, why is he lending money? That doesn't make it. Or why is he lending art to this thing? And how do you make money off it? Doesn't make sense. And the first thing that I saw was these artworks had crazy values, like $50 million for a Picasso that Tony had made.
And he was claiming these were originals.
Claiming they're original. He's like, I'm lending
even
this to you.
Prints, Picasso prints can be worth lots of money, right?
Yeah, prints can be worth, but not like that. I mean, this
not
is
$50 million.
$50 million is an oil on canvas major piece, right? So it's a major piece that's going to this foundation. He lent it, right? And go, what's going on? I look at it and I go, well, this is clearly there's something fishy here. They're not just fooling the people at Dumfries House. There's something fishy here because, for example, the Picasso said that it was verified by the Wildenstein Institute. The Wildenstein Institute only exclusively looks at French Impressionists. So they'll look at Renoir and stuff. They would never look at a Picasso. They would never verify a Picasso. They just don't. That's somebody else, right? So I go, there's no expert could have looked at this and accepted a provenance like that, an authentication like that. Then there was a Monet, the famous water lilies, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's these famous water lilies. There's a major water lily. It's worth, I forget what it was exactly now on the contract, 30 million, something like that. And it has a date of 18, it's been a while, but let's say 1890. And I'm like, well, could never pass muster either, because that garden where the water lilies are and that Monet built specifically so that he could paint these paintings wasn't built until 10 years later. So you're like, you wouldn't even have to be an expert to go like, this is bullshit. And it's really like a pretty bad, it's a pretty bad mistake. So this told me this did not go to the curatorial staff. Nobody really looked at this. Nobody really went, what are these things? This went to somewhere else.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so these contracts were signed with a guy called Michael Fawcett. Michael Fawcett was Prince Charles' right-hand man, like literally his right-hand man. When Prince Charles broke his arm, he was putting the royal toothpaste.
Name sounds familiar.
Yeah. He's putting the royal toothpaste on the royal toothbrush. I mean, he is as close as you can get. And somehow he's in this scheme with Stunt. I can't prove it, right? But he's in the scheme with Stunt. So I look at this and I go, this is a big story, 300 million pounds, $300 million worth of art going into the Prince's collection, the future King of England, the future owner of the Royal Collection, one of the greatest art collections in the world, is full of fake art. And what's going on here?
I don't mess around when it comes to sleep. I want something that's built right, built to last, and that's why I switched to a Brooklyn bedding mattress. You can literally feel the craftsmanship in their beds. Honest materials, real support, zero gimmicks. They handcraft every mattress in their own factory out in Arizona. No middlemen, no inflated price tags, just solid American-made quality. Mine's got that perfect mix of comfort and support. And the cooling tech is super legit. Their Glacio-Tex covers and Copperflex foam keep me cool all night long, even in the hot Florida heat. Brooklyn Bedding also gets it. Sleep isn't one size fits all. They've got a sleep quiz that matches you to your ideal mattress under 2 minutes. Plus, they back it up with a 120-night comfort trial. So if you don't love it, they'll get it right. Go to brooklynbedding.com and use my promo code Danny at checkout to get 30% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. That's brooklynbedding.com and use the promo code DANNY for 30% off site-wide. Support our show and let them know we sent you. brooklynbedding.com, promo code Danny. It's linked down below. Back to the show.
So I was at the time exploring making a documentary with Keith Davidson, Academy nominated director. And I said, hey, look, I have this idea. And he just looks at me and goes, prove it. I go, not sure how to do that. But I said, no problem, which, is a huge task because this kind of stuff is just very hard to prove.
Yes.
And B, the royal family has this culture of secrecy around them where their motto is never complain and never explain. So if something happens, you don't bitch about it. You just ignore it. No comment. Not going to happen. Nothing's ever going to happen. So I'm thinking, well, how am I going to go prove this?
Never complain, never explain.
Never complain, never explain. So
that sounds about right. If you want to, going back to Prince Andrew's interview about Jeffrey Epstein, that makes perfect sense.
And they have teams and intelligence apparatus and stuff around them that they quash everything. So I think, how am I going to do this? But it's a pretty good adventure. And so I started out, I thought this is a big story and it's super exciting and I'm really interested in it and I'm just going to go for it. So on my own dime, I just said, I'm going to go try to do this. And we first contacted James Stunt and we said, hey, James, we're doing a thing, it's about art. There was some newspaper article that just said, hey, this guy is friendly with Prince Charles and lends him stuff and gives him gifts. What's the deal? So I called him up and I said, hey, I'm interested in doing a documentary about great art collectors. And I know that you've, lent stuff to Prince Charles. Could we talk? He was polite, and he said, well, let me think about it. And then he just was like, no. He'd only given one print interview, had never been on camera doing interviews, had never done any press. So he just didn't want to do anything. And so I thought, well, all right, how's this going to happen? How am I going to figure this out? And then so I thought, well, okay, I'm going to send somebody to Dumfries' house. I'm going to sneak them in and I'm going to have them look around because mostly 18th century portraiture. Are they going to have some Picassos or whatever?
Who's Dumfries again?
Dumfries' house is the headquarters where the stuff was lent to.
Oh, got it.
So I said, I'm going to sneak somebody in there, take a look around. Do we see these paintings? Well, of course, they went up there. They didn't see anything. So I'm like, wow, that's not good, because now I'm thinking, did this ever happen? Was this just a scheme that never went anywhere?
Yeah.
Did they pull out at the last minute? So we thought, well, what if we went to James Stunt's house or his office where he keeps his collection? If it's on the walls, it means it didn't happen. He didn't actually lend them. So no story.
Mm-hmm.
The hard part is getting in there, right?
Right.
So during this time, he was in a feud with the press in the UK because they were reporting on he was having trouble with money laundering and stuff. He had been charged. He had been charged with money laundering. And so the press was reporting on him. He hated the press. And so he would go on social media every day, go on YouTube and, have these hour-long kind of coke-fueled rants.
Wow.
Yeah. About...
Is this shit still on YouTube?
No, it's pulled down. In fact, for 2 years, I got up every morning at 5. He got kicked off YouTube. So then he was on Instagram and he was doing lives and stuff. And they would disappear after 24 hours. So every morning for 2 years, I'd get up at 5 in the morning and record his lives. I'd capture him on my phone.
So he would wake up the next day and regret doing it and delete it, or
no, they just last 24 hours.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
I see.
So I'd have to grab them, and now they're all deleted. So I think I'm the only person who has the James Stunt collection in my archives. But anyway, he would go on social media, and one of the crazy things that he was saying was like, I'm going to do a polygraph test. I'm going to have a polygrapher come. I'm going to have it filmed, and I'm going to prove that all this stuff that the press is saying about me is a lie. It's a lie. So we contacted him, and I said, hey, we'll come film the polygraph, and we'll put it out there if you let us come film your art collection. And he goes, I'm shocked. I was amazed. He goes, great idea. And so there you go. So now we had our way in to go look at his art collection. And so for 2 days, I actually used to, as I was saying before, used to work with Japanese TV. So I had a colleague of mine, be the crew, because I couldn't really go in, because if I go in, if he finds out who I am, you could kind of reverse engineer that I was connected to Tony Tetro, that I'd written some stuff about him. And so
if he knew that you knew Tony, that wouldn't be good.
He would, this smells bad. But anyway, so we went for 2 days. We filmed in his house and office, and we didn't see any of the works. So we thought, aha, I think they actually went to Dumfries' house. And it was wild because this, my crew was in there and he's showing him around for 2 days. He's pointing out like another Tony Tetro fake. And he's going, yeah, I bought this at Sotheby's. I think I paid $1 million for it. Isn't it great? And all this stuff. And I'm like,
he knew that the Tony Tetro made them?
Oh, yeah.
And he was just lying to these people.
Yeah. I mean, he bought them. I have millions of emails. I have all the emails with, they're discussing the specific work of art, and their emails with images of the work, and he's going, oh yeah, do it like this, maybe like that, put this stamp on it, and all this other stuff. And he's sitting there talking about how, oh yeah, I bought this at Sotheby's, it's a real thing. Oh, I'm so great. Wow. I know a lot about art and all this kind of stuff.
Oh my God.
Yes. So, we get back and I'm like, I think we got something, and I'm pretty excited. And I had a contact through someone. I had a contact who's a senior figure in MI6, which is foreign intelligence in the UK, like James Bond kind of thing. And he was an old guy. And I said to him, hey, I think this is going on. Do you know people in the palace who could verify this or who I could talk to? And he came back with this amazing email. And the person wrote back to him, somebody like the right-hand people in the palace wrote back and they said, Fawcett, Stunt's right-hand guy, who I think was involved, Fawcett, the palace, the firm, meaning the palace, the firm know about this. Fawcett will have gotten a rocket, meaning Fawcett would have just been blasted for this. And Giampiero will find all doors closed, meaning never complain and never explain. So we're going to pretend none of this happened. We're just going to pretend none of this happened. It's going to go away. You can't prove it. Those paintings are going to be gone. It's over. So we thought, fuck that. We're not going to just let it go like this. So we had made contact with some of the press in the UK. And we said, look, we have this story, can prove it all. I have millions of documents. I have all this stuff. I've done all this work. I can show you that this has happened. You publish it. And they go, because I wanted to force the hand of the palace. I wanted them to have to acknowledge it.
Right.
And so on the Mail on Sunday, we kind of worked the story up with them and they proved it up. And they went to Prince Charles's people and they had to acknowledge it. And they came back and they said, we acknowledge it happened. It's extremely regrettable. And, we were in London at the time and the editor called me up and he said, hey, tomorrow morning, check the paper, pages 1 to 5, check in there. Okay. So I'm like, all right, there's going to be an article somewhere between page 1 and page 5. I look, it's literally the entire first 5 pages of the newspaper, of the largest circulation Sunday newspaper in the UK, is this story. And I mean, huge headlines, fake art hits Prince Charles and all this stuff. So at that point, we knew we had it. And when you do something like that, suddenly, I mean, I'm sure know this from when you do something about a story, people come out of the woodwork. And now there's all kinds of stuff that you can find out. And, the first thing that happened is I was able to find more of his collection. And what I originally thought was that, all right, he got 4 Tony fakes in there. I still didn't know exactly what he was doing. I'm like, okay, he got 4 Tony. Is he like, are they going to lose them or burn them and then claim insurance? Now you've just made, I don't know, 15, 20 million from some fake works of art that got stolen or burned or whatever.
Interesting.
That's what I thought. But then I got all these other documents. And one of the things that I got was the assessment of his entire collection. And I'm like, all right, this guy's got Renoirs, Monets, Picassos. In the loan, there were 17 paintings. 4 of them were Tony Tetro paintings. So these other paintings, like Van Dyck and stuff like that, like very important paintings, I thought, okay, well, those are real. He fluffed it up with some Tony fakes, doubled the value. Okay, he kind of, plumped it up a little. But the reality was, when I looked at his whole collection, they were like kind of middling paintings, 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand. I think there was one that was maybe like 350 grand. That's a lot of money, but compared to the rest of this work, it's peanuts.
And what were the 4 of Tony's? What were they supposedly?
There was a Chagall, a
Picasso,
a Dali, and a Monet. Right? So that was worth 150 million, just that.
God.
Right? Yeah, it's a lot of money. It's a ton of money. But I'm still thinking, well, what is he doing? And this doesn't make sense that he has these, he's really got kind of cheap paintings. And a lot of the paintings were what's called like followers, studio circle followers. So you and I today could go buy a follower of Rembrandt. Rembrandt's probably the most expensive painter in the world. Rembrandt Caravaggio, $100 million, right? $100 million.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought Picasso was the most expensive.
Probably most expensive modern painter, but
Okay.
Old masters like those guys. I mean, extremely, extremely expensive. So you could go buy a studio or circle or follower, not studio for Rembrandt, but circle or follower. And what does that mean? That just means somebody who was around at the time, they liked Rembrandt, maybe they saw his paintings, they knew that he was great. They'd paint some of his painting, something
Same
like
time?
Same time.
Like maybe a student or something?
Or later. Could be a student, could be just somebody who's kind of around the milieu.
Yeah.
I mean, you're interested in films. You could be a follower of Martin Scorsese,
Right. Okay.
You have
I see.
nothing to do with him except for the fact that
I'm a fan.
you're a fan.
Okay. Got it.
So anyway, you and I could go buy one for 10 grand, right? Now, if it's real, let's say it's 10 million of Van Dyke. Van Dyke you can buy for 10 grand, 6, 7, 8 million if it's real. Well, what's the difference between circle and by the hand of the master? Mostly somebody's opinion, right?
Right.
So I'm going to get to it in a minute. But so what happens
Opinions
is
can be paid for.
you're a wise man. So what happens is Stunt had all these studio circle followers, and he would go online and he'd talk about like, yeah, I'm really great at finding sleepers. Well, what's a sleeper? A sleeper is a painting that's been attributed as studio circle or follower, but it's really by the hand of the master. And
Oh, wow.
yeah. So at the same time, what I found was Stunt had put together a PowerPoint presentation. He got a financial advisory in London called W. Coleman to put this thing together. And it was a little PowerPoint presentation. It had the Tony paintings and it had 13 other paintings. And it said, The Stunt Collection at Dumfries House. And it was a presentation. Well, what's a presentation for? Well, what he was doing, well, so he's got these paintings there. He's got these Van Dykes in there, okay? He's got Tony's painting. He's got these Van Dykes. And if they're real, they're worth another 150 million or whatever. But all of these paintings, I mean, we figured out that all of these paintings were actually studio circle and follower, that he had gotten one guy who was the former director of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and I mean a big time director, and was the deputy director of the National Portrait Gallery in London, one of the most important galleries in the world. He was a deputy director.
Wow.
And this guy is buddies with Stunt, right? He's buddies with Stunt, and somehow he's written 14 letters for him saying, hey, remember that painting that you bought as a circle at Sotheby's or Christie's for 10 grand? Well, I've looked at it and it's really by the hand of so-and-so. It's really by the hand of Van Dyke. It's worth, 10 million, right? Now, you find one of those paintings in a generation, it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal to find what you thought was a $10,000 painting. It's worth 10 million. He's found 14 of them from one collector, verified by one expert. How is that possible? It's not possible.
Right.
Right. And we found this letter, we took a picture of this letter of Stunt. It said, from Prince Charles, it said, "Oh, James, it was such a sad thing that you couldn't be there when Malcolm Rogers, this expert, showed up with your paintings at Dumfries House to show them to me and to lend them to me. It's so wonderful of you to do this kind of stuff." And you go, why is Malcolm Rogers, this eminent director, hanging out with this, crazy cokehead who smokes crack on his social media and does his crazy stuff? Why is he hanging out with him? Well, he's getting something out of this thing, So when I called him up, I said, "Hey, there's a painting that you had. It's in the catalog resume. There's a Van Dyke painting that you had. And it was a copy. In the catalog, it's a copy owned by Malcolm Rogers. Well, how did James Stunt end up with it?" And he goes, "Oh, well, he traded me another painting for it." And I go, that's interesting. Well, what painting was it? And he goes, "It's none of your business." And that's kind of one of the things, one of the reasons why people like art, people with a lot of money like art, is because it's not because they love art. A lot of them do love art, but it's not just because they love art, but it's kind of the last Wild West financial instrument. So you can buy a painting. So my theory is there's no record of this. There's no nothing. It's just, I give you a painting, you give me a painting. Great. It's a gift to you, a gift to me. Everybody's happy, right? So the painting I give you could be worth $1, and the painting you give me could be worth $10 million. Now you've just given me $10 million, but there's no record of it anywhere. There's no financial catalog. There's no nothing.
Right.
This is a great way to just like transfer money.
Launder money.
That's why people so you see a lot of financial transactions. Why do rich people, why do they even care about art? Why would you, isn't it stupid to pay $50 million for a Picasso? It can't be worth that much money. Well, it is as a financial instrument, right? Because now you can, for example, buy a piece of modern art and you go, well, how the fuck did somebody pay $10 million for that banana taped to a wall? Right? Did you see the banana taped to the wall?
I did.
Okay.
In
So,
Miami.
yeah, right. So you go, well, how is that possible? And you go, okay, well, now you buy that paint. You take that painting, all right? Let's say, I don't know, you buy it for $2 million. Somebody says, well, it's worth $10 million. Now you lend it to an institution. Now you have $8 million of, kind of like charitable donation on your books. Nobody really knows what it's worth. You can kind of make it up.
It was printed out of thin air.
It's an immaterial kind of thing. The market has no comparable to that? You say it's worth 10. Is it really? I don't know. But now you have $10 million worth of tax write-off, right? And that's one of the things that people do with art. So it's used in all of these transactions.
The holidays have officially started, and that means lots of shopping and get-togethers. And you don't want to be stinking up the aisles after intense decorating. That's why I choose Mando. And if you order using my code, you get 20% off from your pits to your package and everywhere in between. Mando controls body odor for 72 hours, which is perfect for intense shoppers. It's clinical strength, meaning 2 times better than the standard deodorants. And after just 12 hours, sweat was reduced by 92%. And it doesn't just mask odor, it prevents it. 100% of study participants experienced all-day odor protection. My favorite is their new deodorant plus sweat control solid stick. And my go-to flavor is that bourbon leather, baby. It is absolutely pleasant in hot situations. Mando Starter Pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, a cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. And as a special offer for our listeners, new customers get 20% off site-wide with our exclusive code. Use code DANNY at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Mando's got you covered with deodorant plus sweat control. Say goodbye to sweat stains and hello to long-lasting freshness. Don't let the meat sweats get you this holiday season. Your family and friends will thank you.
So what did Stunt do? Stunt took this fake art and this inflated art, this art that was student follower, whatever, bundled it all up into this $300 million thing, lent it to Prince Charles. Now what does he do? Now he goes out to special art lenders, right?
So it's a $350 million catalog of art
Yes.
that he loans
Yeah.
to Prince Charles. And when you say he loans that $350 million worth of art to Prince Charles, what is he getting in return? The tax write-off?
Here's the thing. So now, here's a tip for if you're an evil dude or if you're somebody doing funky stuff, pay the people who work for you because they know everything.
Right.
So I located this guy who was the driver and bodyguard. This is this huge former Lithuanian former professional basketball player who was their bodyguard. And he would hang out downstairs.
For Stunt?
Yeah. And Stunt and his guy would be upstairs doing whatever they were doing. And they'd send an email down to this guy and they'd say, hey, can you print this document out and then bring it upstairs? And they'd email him. So this guy, who was not paid by Stunt, had a treasure trove of everything. And what it turned out was that, I met the guy and we, got to know each other, and he sort of opened up about this stuff and gave me these things. But what it turns out happening is that Stunt had this collection. It's now at it's Prince Charles's royal collection. So it's like absolutely above suspicion, right? I mean, there is no better provenance than it is in the royal collection.
Right.
And all of these experts have said it's good.
Right.
Because he also made a bunch of fake letters and all this other stuff. But now he goes out to specialized art lenders in New York because there are people who will lend on your art. You go, I'm going to give you my Picasso as collateral. You lend me half the value. If I don't pay you back, you keep the art.
Like a pawn shop.
Yeah, pretty much. High-class pawn shop with, blue chip art.
Right.
Nothing more blue chip than it's in the Prince's collection. Prince Charles has it right now. Lend me the money, of course. So he wanted $161 million. And the plan all along was I just walk away from it. They keep the collateral. It's not worth anything.
Right. It's a fake, right?
Yeah. It's all I did the total sum of what that art was really worth. It was probably worth charitably $2 million. So you're getting $161 million off of $2 million collateral. It's a pretty good deal. You walk away, that's it.
Wow.
Yes.
This guy's a billionaire. And he's trying to...
Well, his wife was a billionairess.
Uh-huh.
He was wealthy, but not in that category. But he spent money like it was going out of style.
Was his wife still alive or no?
Yeah. Yeah, they got divorced. So when they got divorced, suddenly he's like, the gravy train is over, so I got to find access to
Didn't get a great
money.
Settlement on the divorce, huh?
No. And went through it quick. I mean, some of the sources were telling me, he'd go out and there'd be drugs and champagne and stuff, $100,000 a night, easy. That's
Jesus Christ.
That's pretty. You go through money pretty quick at that clip.
That's insane. And they also have, I forget which movie, I was watching a movie where they had basically like this offshore vault of where people would keep artwork there. Yeah. And people would go there, make transactions, and something to do with it being like out of like a certain country's territory or jurisdiction. Yeah. Made it away like a tax loophole or something.
Yeah, they're called free ports.
Free ports.
And so they're literally basically like extra territorial zones at airports usually.
At airports, yes.
So the most famous one is in Geneva, and that's, that kind of figures in that whole story you were talking about, the Lost Leonardo, which I have some interesting thoughts on too.
Was that in the Lost Leonardo documentary?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. So Yves Bouvier, who was the guy who bought the Leonardo for the Russian, he made his fortune with that Freeport.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So a lot of people who buy $50 million pieces of art never have them. They kind of just go to the Freeport or stay in the Freeport. They don't pay taxes on them. They don't actually import them into their homes or into their possession. They just leave them there. So it's really like it's like any other financial asset. It's like crypto or whatever. You don't see it, you don't have it. It's just kind of in this place.
It stays at this airport. That's so strange,
Yeah.
dude.
I don't know if you ever saw, there was this film, and I can't remember the name, but it involves a guy crashing a big plane into one of these
Yes,
free ports.
that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of that movie though. It was a freaking amazing film.
Yeah. So they have all this state-of-the-art fire suppression, like they can evacuate all of the oxygen in like 2 seconds, and everything locks, and everything is like, biometric.
Steve, you got to find that movie, bro. Find the movie where there's a huge firefight in one of these airport Freeport vaults where there's like all this like modern art and all this crazy stuff. But yeah, no, it's such a wild thing. And the Lost Leonardo, eventually, so that piece, the Salvator Mundi, which was allegedly, they thought that was basically drawn by one of Leonardo's students or something like this. Mm-hmm. And that lady went to go restore it. She stripped a bunch of stuff off it and then basically repainted like 90% of it. And long story short, it ended up in the yacht of Mohammed bin Salman, the Prince of Saudi Arabia, for like $500 million.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things about that. And, everybody has their opinion. And I will say, I am not an expert at all. And I'm just kind of, observing and giving what I sort of think is plausible. But a lot of people think that it is actually real. Tony Tetro, the art forger, thinks it's real.
Does he really?
Yeah. Martin Kemp, who is the foremost Leonardo expert, I think thinks it's real, or think there's a very good chance that it's real.
Martin Kent?
Kemp. Yeah. But I'm not sure. And what I do find interesting, like what you say is correct. So if you take a painting and you restore it to the extent where you've repainted a whole bunch of it, well, yeah, of course it looks like Leonardo because you just painted it to look like Leonardo.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know. I'm not saying that's what happened. Her name is Diane Modestini, and she's very well regarded, and I don't know anything about this from an expert perspective, but I'll just say, you do have to ask the question, like if it's been so extensively repainted, I mean, what can you really say about the painting? Right. Somebody like Kemp or Tetro will say that, there are hallmarks of the work that definitely make it that. But the other thing here is, so it was $450 million. That's a lot of money. And what the film gets into, which I thought was really interesting, was great piece of work, was there's a lot of pressure with that kind of money that can be brought to bear when really all you're talking about is opinions, right? I mean, would $450 million get you to say that Steve's the greatest guy who ever lived? It might make me say that,
Tenet, that was the movie. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, this was such a good scene. Play with no audio so we don't get copyrighted and make it small. Yeah, this was this a Christopher Nolan movie?
I don't remember.
It was, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, fast forward to like halfway through where they're in that vault. Yeah, there it is. Oh, so they can like suck all the oxygen out of it.
Yeah. They suck the oxygen out and they pump it with.
So, oh wow, look at that, dude.
Yeah, so here they are stealing works kind of in the nick of time while all this stuff happens.
Is that, so are the real ones, can they suck the oxygen out of? Is that real? I wonder. Like if someone's trying to rob it or whatever, they can just like lock the doors and like make you black out.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, this was wild. This was a wild scene.
Yeah. So the Leonardo, I mean, when there's that much money at stake, there's a lot of pressure that can be brought to bear, right? Mm-hmm. So what I thought was really interesting about that film was that all of these efforts, once MBS had bought the painting, there was a lot of pressure put by the Saudi government on the French government to make that thing be real. So if you remember, there was this whole thing about like, they're talking about as the male Mona Lisa, the most famous painting in the world is the Mona Lisa.
Yes.
Well, this thing, we're now going to make it be the male Mona Lisa.
Right.
So they were trying to get the Louvre to show the piece next to the Mona Lisa, right, and legitimize it. And
who was trying to do this? Mohammed bin
MBS,
Salman?
yeah,
Okay.
because now he owns it. So he's like, all right, well, now I'm going to make this really valuable.
Just having that documented being there would
Yes.
be extremely
Yes,
valuable.
yes. Because that's what happens with a lot of pieces. Like sometimes if someone has a questionable painting, they might lend it to a museum, you know, under really favorable terms. Why? Because they wanted to have that stamp. This was in the, you know, this was in MoMA.
Right.
So now you've just added value. But anyway, so he's trying to add this value. And what they did was they came to the Louvre and the Louvre said no. I think they had a book printed up and then they pulled it. And they were going to put it in there and then they pulled it because they had doubts. So MBS says to the French government, hey, listen, we would consider it a great favor if you maybe suggested to the Louvre that this thing be shown next to the Mona Lisa, right? And then they said, and by the way, you know, we are building this huge city in the desert, and why wouldn't a French company get that contract, right? You know,
Right.
let's see if we can't do something here. That's kind of what the film talks about. And
that's the way the whole world works,
Yeah.
man.
yeah, and that's what you think that art is kind of like some blue blood kind of specialty pursuit for people with really high sensibilities. And it is, and they're very genuine and passionate people in art, but there's a whole other part of it. The market is a different animal altogether. I mean, that's really a lot of people who don't know much or care much about art for art's sake, you know, use it as a useful financial instrument,
Right.
you know?
Right. Yeah. Would this modern art be what it is culturally if it wasn't for the billionaires, the stunt type fellas, or the MBSs, or the popes for that matter, like with the Sistine Chapel, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Look, art always has to have patrons. I mean, the great art of the past had patrons.
Yes.
You know, you had Cardinal, the Vatican, just every church in Italy has 12 master paintings. You know, somebody paid for those. You know, there were great patrons at the turn of the century. You know, industrialist tycoons and stuff were building museums. You know, Carnegie and all that kind of stuff. They're building museums. So there's always patrons, but I think it's kind of reached a different level now. And a lot of that is because there really aren't that many ways to transact that are not very traceable or that are really subjective, right? I mean, it's kind of hard. You can't carry around $50 million in gold. You can't. It's a huge amount.
Right.
You can roll up a little painting, carry it around across borders, you know, you're fleeing a country or whatever. Hey, you got this thing. So there's that kind of utility. But also, you know, with like know your client regulations and money laundering regulations and stuff like that, it's just a lot harder to do funky transactions. You know, with art, it's so subjective that it's really easy to do. You know, you can make 50 million become 80 million. You can make 20 million become 50 million with the stroke of a pen. You know, and it's all subjective. I mean, people talk about comparables and stuff, but I mean, like I said, you know, who's really gonna, if somebody pays for it, then that's what it's worth.
Yes.
You know?
Right.
So you don't know.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why it's used so much now. And, you know, there's so, like, I don't know how many people really experience or value art in their daily lives, like modern art in their daily lives. Not that much for it to have those kind of values. So a lot of it is about kind of like manufacturing demand. You know, some guy gets plucked out of obscurity and a gallery represents them, puts all their money behind it and stuff.
Yeah.
So you really do have like a lot of kind of manufactured value, which then the bottom drops out a lot of times. I was just reading, I can't remember who the artist was, but somebody who, 5-6 years ago, the paintings are worth $8-10 million. Why? Because, I don't know, Frieze said it was at the time.
Yeah.
And now, it's a couple, 50 grand or something like that. So that happens a lot more.
Right.
It seems to me.
And then like how rare it is too, right? Like there's only like if there's one of these things of this famous artist that existed in medieval times, that obviously for people obviously of a certain financial class is going to be super valuable. It's kind of like diamonds, right? It's kind of like a weird thing, or gold, like diamonds and gold. It's a weird thing that humans are obsessed with, and the value can go up and down, and you can trade on it, and it's like. And things like this are, they're just like they naturally attract scam artists and con artists. And it's the same thing that you've seen with the rise of crypto and NFTs, and these NFTs especially. You've seen so many people get caught up in these crazy NFT scams where they like pump up the value in the beginning, give them all out, sell them all out to their people, and then they like pull all the money out and the thing just goes nowhere. And then none of these people even get in trouble.
Yeah. No, it's totally true. I mean, one thing with art and forgers that I find really interesting is that, unlike some other scams where it's just like crypto or whatever, you steal wallets or you have some fake token that isn't worth anything, but you can convince people that it's worth something for a while. The art forger is kind of seen as almost like a Robin Hood figure, or kind of like an anti-authority figure, right? Because you have this whole world that's created to tell you as a non-expert. The whole world is built up to look like this is really expensive, this is really elite, this is really classy. You don't get it. The experts get it. Here's why it's worth all this money, but you don't get it, right? And the art forger sort of says, well, that's bullshit, and I can prove that it's bullshit because I'll make a piece that's fake, and you'll talk about how great it is and how, this could only be the great so-and-so because of this and that. And then you go, well, no, I made it. So, what you're saying is bullshit and you don't know what you're talking about. So it's really kind of exposing the emperor's clothes. And I think people really like that and respond to that, and that's why I think people it's a little bit of a folk hero, why there's so many films about art forgers, or why it's always an interesting story for people when art forgery happens.
Right.
Because it punctures this whole world of bullshit.
And it's interesting. I like it better than the crypto stuff, because the crypto stuff, it's you have just normal everyday folks who are getting scammed. Yeah. With the art forgers, it's not usually the case, right? Like you're dealing with billionaires and like big institutions and like.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, lots of people get hurt, but but really, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right.
You're not dealing with people who are living paycheck to paycheck, and like
you're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, if some rich guy pays $10 million for a piece, it turns out to be fake. I mean, is he going to be out on the street? I doubt it. Right. So you're kind of okay with it. But yeah, and I mean, and that's like it's interesting because Tony always says that when he got busted, that I think it was CNN or somebody did a documentary, and he was in some kind of bar that he hung out in, and he happened to have the VHS, and he was sitting there, and the bartender said, "Hey, let's see your VHS." And he's like, "Nah, nobody's going to be interested in this. Somebody's going to be interested in this, I don't know." But they put it on. He said, and this was kind of like a blue collar, beer and sawdust kind of bar. And he said that it was just like you could hear a pin drop, and everybody kind of loved it, because it is really sort of getting back at these, at rich people and experts and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, the snobs.
Yeah.
Most premium shirts make you choose between looking good or feeling good. True Classic said screw that. Their goal was simple: make gear that fits right, feels great, and doesn't empty your wallet. And that's why I love wearing True Classic. They don't accidentally sell 25 million shirts to more than 5 million customers with over 200,000 5-star reviews. And what I like most isn't just about the clothing. It's about the confidence. You throw one of these things on and it just fits. Tailored where you want it, relaxed where you need it. No weird stiffness, no boxy cuts, and no nonsense. I've been wearing True Classic for a while now, between recording days, casual days, even going out to dinner. Their clothing is the perfect middle ground between going to the gym or going out for a fancy meal. It looks sharp, it feels soft, and it moves with your body. And now they've got lines for women and kids too. Same comfort, same quality for everyone. So this holiday season, skip the overpriced designer stuff, give comfort, give confidence, give True Classic. Find them at Amazon, Target, Costco, or for the best deals, go to trueclassic.com/Danny. That's trueclassic.com/Danny. It's linked down below. Now back to the show. Whatever happened to Tony? Did he get charged with anything and go to prison?
Yeah. You mean, well, he got busted in 1989.
Oh, wow.
In 1989, he got busted. And he, because somebody wore a wire on him. One of the guys. So the interesting thing about Tony is that Tony never really fooled anybody with his paintings. Never fooled anybody. The dealers in Beverly Hills galleries and everywhere else would come to him and say, "Hey, Tony, I need a Picasso. I need some Dali. I need some Miro." And they knew they could get them from him. So they'd come to him, and then they were the ones selling the paintings, right? So one of those guys got busted and wore a wire.
Ratted on him.
Yeah, ratted on him. And Tony, who's this Italian-American guy from kind of a mob town in upstate New York, said, it is ingrained in the DNA of every Italian kid from Fulton, New York, that you never rat. The only time you rat is never. That's what he said. So this guy wore a wire. He ended up pleading and actually got off pretty easily. He did a year.
That's kind of an amazing picture.
Yeah.
So Tony only did a year?
He only did a year because he had been through like 5 years of trial.
Oh,
so
wow.
I think the judge kind of had mercy on him. And, it was debatable who was really at fault on a lot of these things. So I think they went a little easy on him.
It's kind of cool. His story is kind of cool. And I can imagine his paintings, a Tony Tetro Picasso, could be worth a lot of money now, you know?
I mean, that's what he does now. So when he got out of jail, he went clean because he was like, this time I got off fairly easy.
He went legit.
Yeah. I don't want to be here again. So he would paint. That's why he ended up painting these paintings for Stunt. So, before that, he had another very wealthy client, tech billionaire in Texas who, had a bunch of mansions and stuff. And he, I think, painted 99 paintings for him.
Jesus.
So, there's a very good living to be made making plausible forgeries, emulations for people who wanted to have art in their house. Some people want to have maybe they have a piece, maybe it's in the Freeport, maybe they want to put it on their wall,
right?
But they don't want to pull the thing out of insurance. They don't want to insure it. They don't want to worry about it.
Right.
So they get a Tony Tetro.
And whatever happened to Stunt?
Stunt was on trial. I mean, this was a big problem for our documentary. So our documentary is still not released.
I know.
Because
of him?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Because the reason it's not released is because after we released the story to the press, COVID hit. So we couldn't film for a year. That's when I wrote the book, Con Artist, about Tony. And when we kind of came back online, Stunt was then on trial for money laundering, the biggest money laundering trial in British history.
Really?
Yeah. And it was him and 4 co-defendants. So while he was on trial, we could not release the film. There are very, very, very stringent laws in the UK about contempt of court. So while someone's on trial, we could not.
Even if it's in America?
Yeah. Well, technically, we probably could have shown it in America, possibly, but the studio chose not to.
Ah, okay. Oh, you're working with the studio.
Right. So This trial took forever. Finally, the trial came back. Guilty or innocent didn't matter to us, right? Because if the trial would be over, we could show the film.
Right.
Well, what happened? The jury came back hung, and the Crown Prosecution Service said, we're going to retry him, and we're going to retry him in 2 years. So 2.5 years later, which was just, a few months ago, the trial finally ended.
And where's he at?
Stunt was acquitted. All of his all of his associates were found guilty. The banks who were involved were all fined, had huge, hefty fines, and he walked.
No.
Yes.
Fucking way.
Correct. And the alleged attempted fraud with the art was never prosecuted because the lenders never consummated the loan. And so they just said, forget it. We'll let it go. So Stunt's walking around free as a bird.
Probably not rolling as hard as it used to be.
Nope.
Is this him on the right?
Yeah.
He looks kind of young there.
That was a younger.
That was an older photo.
And the one on the left is as he looks now.
The one on the left looks like he's had a little bit too much plastic surgery.
Yeah, I think there were some problems with the septum.
The deviated septum? He had to get a new nose. Or find a better way to get the coke in his body. Jesus.
And I say that because he would go on his social media and say, yeah, the social media was unbelievable.
I can imagine.
It's unbelievable. He's, you'll see it in the film, but he gets on there and he goes like, do I love cocaine? Yeah, I love it. Do I shag prostitutes? Yeah. Do I sleep with royalty? Yes, I do. All this kind of stuff. And, he's like sitting there in one shot, he's sitting there and he's smoking a foil thing off of a bottle. And he's going like, I'm just sitting here kicking it, chilling, smoking some crack and listening to some NWA gangster rap, as you do.
As one does.
As one does.
As a billionaire does.
Yeah. So, that's kind of his persona. And
as a guy who didn't earn any of the money that he has.
No.
He got it all out of the divorce from his super rich wife.
Well, yeah, yes and no. His father, it's interesting because his father was a self-made man from Brixton, which is, a middle class, working class part of London, made it big, made his fortune, sent James to a fancy school, which it's funny. He's actually a pretty funny guy. He said the students there were like cream, rich and thick meaning dumb. But, so he kind of, that's the milieu that he ended up in. And then when he married, so he was wealthy, but when he married Petra, it was like a completely different stratosphere. So they had like $15 million wedding at this castle in Italy, and the Black Eyed Peas helicoptered in to play and stuff like that. And then they bought this house. They had all this stuff in London. He used to drive around London in a cavalcade of cars. So, he'd go to Sotheby's or whatever. He'd be in this carbon fiber Lamborghini. He'd have rolls on both sides, and then all that surrounded by Land Rovers. And that's how he'd pull up at Sotheby's or would he go get a pack of cigarettes or whatever. So that's what he used to do. And now that those days are over, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a connection between just like an absurd amount of wealth and degeneracy with people, where like I don't think it's good for people to have that much, like there's a sweet spot, right? And when you get a little bit too far, depending on your psychology, I'm sure a lot of people can handle it, right? But a majority of people cannot handle that kind of wealth.
I think it'd be hard. You've done your own stuff. You've achieved things. I've achieved stuff. You gotta, there's some value to be said for, you got to wake up, you got to work hard, you got to be there. This may or may not work. You got to be able to take the risk. You got to work really hard.
Yeah.
That builds character.
Some of the best people I know, most interesting, fun people I know, spent most of their lives poor.
Sure.
Yeah.
You gotta come up, you know.
But I can, the interesting thing is I can say the most fucked up degenerates I've met are also poor, like, but also rich, like I know some very degenerate rich people. So the spectrum is broad. You can't just paint a broad brush over that. But
yeah, I mean, this guy is a really, he's a really interesting character because I think, like, I think that he genuinely wanted to, he mentions kind of like being cast in this new world, and he was around Petra's friends who were all wealthy, very wealthy people, and people who knew like a lot about art and knew about all these things. And I think he was kind of thrust into that and felt like, oh, well, I want to prove myself, or I want to show that I know about something. And I think his initial, and one of his earliest friends and dealers, art dealers, said that, he, in the beginning, it seemed like he had a genuine kind of like passion for art,
Yeah.
but then sort of saw the various uses or the various ways that you could do things with art that were less than,
right,
on the up and up. And, even somebody like Tony, like, so when Tony started out, he's very passionate about art, and very passionate in a kind of like artisan's way. Like, he wants to know, how did he do this? Or look at how he did that. How did he mix that color and do it in such a light texture and all those kinds of things? And, he went into the world. He got his girlfriend pregnant at 16 and became a father.
Tony?
Yes. So he's like, okay, I got to go make a living. He was selling furniture and he was being a milkman and all this shit. And he's like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. So on the weekends, he would do these paintings. He'd go to an art fair or whatever, and people would go like, yeah, I'll give you $20 for this Monet or whatever they had worked on for 3 months.
Yeah.
And, so then he read this book. One day he's at the supermarket. And he's just sitting there bored, and he looks over and he sees this book. It's real colorful and it has a Modigliani on it. He picks it up and it's called Fake. It was about this famous art forger called Elmire de Hori. And he opens it up and he's just like entranced. And he goes home and he just like basically reads it through the night. And it's about this art forger and how he did it. And he just goes, I could do this. I'm going to do this. So he just does it, and it's really interesting because he brings a drawing, it was a Modigliani drawing, and he brings it to this guy. And he goes, yeah, he's like 22 years old. And he brings it to this guy and he says, my grandfather's getting rid of all his stuff so it doesn't end up in probate. He's about to die. And I think this thing is worth some money. What do you think? And the guy goes, he has this like European accent. And he's like, well, perhaps it's worth, I don't know, maybe I can give you $1,600, and he's like, oh, okay. And inside he's like, that's more money than he's ever had. It's like 5 times his rent. He's like, okay. So he takes it, he's out of there. And he said he was like floating on clouds, and he's like, it's going to work. Like, this is my whole new life. He gets home, the phone's ringing, and this guy found out that it was fake from somebody else, long story, but finds out it's fake. And now he's like, you motherfucker, you think you're going to sell me a Fugazi? You're going to work for me now. And he's like, the whole European thing was fake. And he's just this fake guy, and he's like, all right, you're going to have to work for me now. And so he makes him make fakes for him for the next couple of years. And that's how Tony learned to become an art forger, was through his apprenticeship with this guy who, was just selling these things out at his auction house, and he made him be a shill at his auction. So,
really?
They'd be having an auction or something. Okay, you raise your paddle and you bid everything up.
Yeah.
So he'd go there.
Wow.
But that's how he learned to do this,
That's so wild.
So you see that, there are legitimate people in the art world, lots of them, and truly passionate, knowledgeable people. But there are also a lot of people who, It's pretty easy to cut some corners.
Is there a specific time period when the majority of these super valuable pieces of art were created? Because I don't have like a good understanding of like when Picasso, Da Vinci, and some of these others were like when what was the one that you were saying was the most valuable?
Like
Caravaggio, and then was Rembrandt one of them? You were
Rembrandt,
saying, you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
Was this all like Enlightenment middle
1600s, 1700s,
1700s,
Yeah.
and then I think Da Vinci was like 14,
14s, 15s. Yeah. So you had like Renaissance.
Yes.
But there's a
Renaissance.
whole spectrum. There are important and valuable antiquities, Greek and Roman antiquities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then you have really
like how far back do these paintings go? Like how far back do they survive?
Yeah, I mean, you have stuff, valuable objects from BC era, but in terms of like real like oil on canvas, oil on wood, European painting, really the 1300s, 1400s. The Renaissance is the peak, so that's when you have Michelangelo and Da Vinci and Pontormo, Parmigianino, all these people, right? And then you have Baroque, Caravaggio, you have like the Dutch painters, Rembrandt, and all these people. Then you get into, Impressionist paintings, which are in the late 1800s. Then you get into modern painting in the 1900s. Somebody like Picasso, early periods, 10s and 20s, and then all the way into the 70s. I don't remember exactly when he passed away, but something like that. But so there's a whole spectrum of valuable painting.
We had a guy in here who was a forensic pathologist a couple of months ago, and he was. Do you remember the painting, Steve? He was basically he tracked a painting that was done. I don't remember the date, but it was done with the remains of one of the French king's hearts. Somebody bought the heart of one of the French kings, and they took the heart and they ground a part of it up into paint, and they used the shades of red in this painting to paint with his heart. So this guy did a forensic analysis of the painting to make sure it was real, and he put it under the microscope, did all the stuff that forensic pathologists do, and he could find the muscle fibers of this king's heart in the red pigments of this painting. It was an insane.
That's
okay.
amazing.
It was Louis whatever that is, XIV,
yeah,
Louis the 15th heart to make paint. Scroll down to the first paragraph so we can just like explain to people. Yeah, the 17th century French monarch was called the Sun King, but his heart ended up in a shadowy setting. According to the most celebrated forensic scientist in France, fragments of Louis XV's heart was ground up by a second-rate artist to make the color called mummy brown for the use in painting, now hidden in the basement of a small museum in the Paris region.
I love that they call him a second-rate artist.
Crazy, man.
I mean, it's really interesting because, especially with forgery. So, you can do forgeries of any of those periods, right? It's harder to do with old paintings, just because you have old materials, right? So you have to get those original materials.
Right.
Forgery, as Tony used to do it, is no longer really possible. It's pretty much impossible because there's so much technology that you can bring to bear now.
Yeah.
Okay. So when in the past, when they wanted to make a pigment for blue, they would take lapis lazuli, which is a stone, and they would grind it up into fine powder, and they would emulsify it in oil, linseed oil, lilac oil, whatever oils. And that's what your paint is. Basically powders in oil. Okay, that's what an oil painting is. Well, now they can tell, in the past, that lapis lazuli came from one mine in Afghanistan, and it would get traded all the way over to Europe. And so therefore it was extremely expensive. It wasn't used that much, but it came from this one mine. You could identify it. Well, now you have a database of all these materials. So you can look at a painting. Let's say the painting says, oh, it's a 1420 painting. with this blue in it. Well, you can look at the blue and you go, well, you know what? That lapis lazuli comes from a mine that's in Peru. So there's no way that it could have been real, right? It's lapis lazuli. It's good, but it can't be real because it's from a mine that was in Peru before the discovery of the New World by Europe, right? Whoa. So it couldn't have been, that material could not have been in that painting. So there's all of this stuff that you can do with technology now that makes that kind of art forgery almost impossible. Like I'm working, and I'll tell you about this Pollock thing that I'm working on now, which ties into the CIA, the CIA operation. Mm-hmm. But you know, you can look at a piece of wood and you can tell exactly what date that was.
Right.
You can tell, did that piece of wood come from a forest in Poland, or did it come from a forest, as it did a lot, like in the Renaissance and stuff? Did it come from a forest in Washington State? Even if it's an ancient piece of wood, there's no way that could have made it into a painting like that. So you can just tell a lot more now that makes this kind of stuff impossible. Mm-hmm. And then there's, you know, database and just the existence of interconnectedness of the internet. You can just have access to databases and stuff that weren't possible before. Tony says that in the past, he was able to just kind of say like, well, where'd you get this painting? Oh, it's from an Italian family who wishes not to be named. And they'd go, oh, well, there's a dead end. So I guess we'll never know. And you get away with it.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, totally. You know, there's a whole parallel world that exists to this in ancient texts. Mm-hmm. I had this Dead Sea Scrolls expert on here, and he was explaining a very similar situation where this guy was buying these Dead Sea Scrolls, and this guy had to like do some crazy Mission Impossible where he had to go pick them up from this person, and then and take them across France or something, wherever they were, to this this place where they were going to analyze them and all this stuff. And they ended up, this guy paid millions of dollars for these fragments, and they found out that they were fake. And they have like specific ways of figuring. I mean, these weren't like any kind of like, they weren't using AI or anything like that. They were like very rudimentary ways of detecting it under a microscope, like seeing like if this paper or this animal skin has like indentations or like tears in the actual fiber itself, and the ink goes over that perfectly, you know that it was written on it after the degradation of it, versus like, you know, normally you would look at the text and you would see that like the actual ink had been impacted by that degradation of the actual paper or the animal skin. So like there's all these interesting ways of detecting it. And another thing that throws a whole nother monkey wrench into the ancient text stuff is you have countries and cultures that are incentivized to make sure these are real because it props up their whole religious belief. So like, and then and that goes along with the billionaires too, who are like very devout in their religious faith or whatever it is. They want that this needs to be real and from this time period, or else that kind of like kicks a leg out of my whole fundamental belief in God or whatever their belief is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I mean, that's that kind of, I mean, what would you call it? I guess like institutional support for something, you know, exists in the art world too. You know, there's, if you put paintings under black light, you can see the new paint. It kind of glows, right? So people say like, if you went through a museum with a black light, I mean, the whole thing would just start glowing, you know, because there's been so much restoration, all that kind of stuff. And at a certain point, you kind of go like, look, this thing's been in the collection for a couple hundred years. You know, it's an important painting. There's no reason to not believe it or whatever. So you just
I mean,
we'll leave it alone. We'll leave it alone.
I've been to the Louvre. Mm-hmm. When I looked at the Mona Lisa, I would have no clue if I was looking at the real one or the print of it, you know? And I bet you 99.9% of people wouldn't either.
Yeah. Well, so that's a really interesting topic too, because you go like, you know, what is the value of art? And there's all this philosophy at the turn of the century when people started being able to take really good photographs, right? Because before, paintings were the only means by which you could make a real likeness of someone. I want to remember this person. I want to commemorate this person. I want to laud them, right? I want a big monumental painting of their likeness. Well, you had to have a painting. You couldn't do a poster. You weren't going to take a photo, right?
Yeah.
So one of the values of art was how realistically could you reproduce what someone looked like? For hundreds of years, until the Impressionists and stuff, that's what mattered. Now you get a photograph and you go, whatever, I can just take a picture of this person. I don't need your painting. So you go, well, what's the value of this work of art? And there was this famous thing called the art in the age of mechanical reproduction. And the idea was that, okay, well, if there's no utility, I'm not using this just to show me what a person looked like. What's the value of art? And one of the things that they say is that it's like a relic. It becomes like a relic, like a piece of the cross or the robe
Shroud
of
of
a
Turin.
saint. Yeah, exactly. Or Michael Jordan's sneaker, right? That's a relic. And so is that what the art is worth? And if it's worth that, is it, how does that change everything? And also, how does that incentivize people to really believe that it's real?
Yes.
You get an autograph. I mean, I'm a soccer guy, and I have some autographs from guys, that gave me their autograph. But
you usually take a picture of them while they're signing it.
Yeah. Is it any different than just anything? I mean, I don't know. What is it? Is they touched it? I mean, what's the value? You got to ask yourself that. And think about that
I don't
in terms
know.
of art.
It's hard to rationalize it, right? But it's a weird thing that's wired into us.
Yeah.
It's like wired into our DNA that these types of rarities or the older something gets, the more valuable it is, or the more rare, or gold. Why is gold more valuable than anything else? It's so weird.
I refused to buy a diamond ring for my wife. I was just and she doesn't care. She makes jewelry and stuff, and she didn't care either. But it's I mean, this was
such a racket.
Yes, it is. It was manufactured, and there's a lot of history about this, how it's manufactured, demand, that didn't exist until, somewhat existed, but not like today. And I think similar things happened with art, art as well, and the art market.
I have this friend who collects these ancient Egyptian vases. I don't know if you've ever seen these or heard of these. These were found underneath most of them were found underneath the Step Pyramid in Egypt. This is a 3D print remake. But they found these, and they're made of granite. And they're like, wow, that's pretty precise. They were dated to 4000 BC, so 5,000 years ago. And so pre-dynastic granite vases. And they were like, according to all of the Egyptologists and all of the archaeologists and the historians, those people in that time, they were using pounding stones and shit, right? So that's one of the hardest stones on earth. It looks pretty symmetrical to the naked eye. Let's take it to one of these aerospace places and get a light scanner on it and see how accurate it really is. They did that. They did CT scans on it, you name it, the whole bit. And they found out that they were perfectly symmetrical from top to bottom within the deviation of less than a human hair. Basically, if you wanted to recreate that out of granite today, you would need to do that on a computer or a CNC machine. It would have to be 3D printed on CAD, right? So there's this huge rift now in historians and Egyptologists of people claiming they're trying to deny this, that they're that perfect, and they put all those files out on the internet for the public to look at and to scrutinize, and no one's debunked it. But there's a certain sect of archaeologists and Egyptologists, older ones, who were just purposely trying to pretend it doesn't exist, because it sort of destroys the whole timeline of humanity, and especially in Egypt, the whole timeline of Egypt. Yeah.
I mean, I think that there's a resistance in any field when expertise is questioned. I am a big stickler for evidence that can be repeatable, and documentary evidence and all that kind of stuff. That said, there is always an orthodoxy that kind of is resistant. I mean, I think it's incumbent upon everybody, journalists and everybody alike, you have to do the work and you have to prove stuff and not just kind of like, small or what ifs or small inferences. I mean, it doesn't,
right.
You got to prove it. You got to prove it. But if you do prove it, there is still a lot of resistance. So I'm doing this work now, as mentioned, that Pollock piece. I don't know if you want to get into it or.
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay. All right. So you think we'd take a break for a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we'll be right back. All right. So let's jump back into the show.
Yes.
We're back. We were going to talk about Pollock and the CIA.
Sure. So you know a little bit about this topic, it sounds like, but some of it is, I think, overblown. And some of it that some people make a little too much out of it. That's my personal opinion. But so I started looking at this because of my book Con Artist and because of the James Stunt investigation. I have been contacted by some collectors who will say, look, I'm thinking about buying this piece, or, I've been introduced to this piece. What do you think? Use your investigative chops or whatever and see what you can find out about this thing. Does it seem real or does it seem, potentially fake? So a person brought to me a Pollock, purported Pollock, not in the catalog. There are a lot of fake Pollocks out there. There are a lot of really bad fakes. There are some pretty good ones. But so he brought me this Pollock that had been in Switzerland. And it came out of Switzerland. It had a provenance behind it that it showed up in Switzerland in the early 50s, mid 50s. It had been in some prominent families in Switzerland. And it had some marks on it from the U.S. consulate and a couple of people. So I started looking at this and, what could this thing be? And, it turns out that in the post-war period, there was a Cold War on, and it was really for the hearts and minds of people.
Propaganda war.
Yeah, exactly. It was a propaganda war, and some of the main propaganda war was being fought for the hearts and minds of intellectuals. So, the Soviet Union was saying, like, look what Western democracies wrought. So what we need is a world where the artist is working for the greater society and is doing basically like a political act, which is for the people. And so what Americans wanted to show was like, no, really our method is the best, whereby we let people be very free.
Yes.
And you just can do whatever you want. You can be a leftist. You can be on the right, you can do whatever, but our society says we get better, richer, smarter, happier when we give people freedom. And so the CIA wanted to counter kind of like, Soviet realism with an art form that would appeal to these people. And they looked at abstract expressionism, like, what Jackson Pollock was doing. And they're like, well, here's this artist. He's a leftist. He's kind of a cowboy kind of guy. He's from Wyoming. He's a big drinker, masculine guy. And he does these paintings that are so free, they don't even have to mean anything. They don't represent anything. They're not impressionist. Here's an impressionistic view of a landscape. They're just like pure expression.
Can you find a photo of Jackson Pollock, Steve? I've never actually looked at a photo of him.
Yeah. He's from Wyoming originally and was, kind of like a cowboy kind of guy before he came to New York.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he was like he drank too much, but I mean, he died because of it.
Most of the best artists do.
Yeah. But he was like a heavy drinking, masculine, tough guy sort of vibe. And so they thought, okay, well, we need to push these paintings. And their initial steps at kind of pushing modernism were really terrible and ham-fisted. And there were all these senators who came out and said like, hey, your taxpayers bought this crap. Your taxpayers bought these crappy paintings and brought them around and stuff. So the CIA said, hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to do this kind of on the down low. And what they did was they set up all of these foundations and stuff that were really CIA fronts to support gallery shows and symposiums and magazines and newspapers and stuff. Like famously, the Paris Review was a CIA front and founded by these things. And what I found, so anyway, I started doing a lot of research about this particular Pollock painting, and I went and looked in the archives of MoMA and Crystal Bridges and at the Pollock Foundation out in Long Island and stuff. And, you know, I kind of started looking at all of the communications between all of these people. And I mean, there isn't anything that crazy nefarious in my mind here. But you know, they just kind of started pushing this as much as they could, but without really kind of telling anybody that it was the government that was behind this stuff. And what was really interesting to me was
because these people were fundamentally against the government and the wars and everything that was going on.
Yes. So you could kind of show like somebody like Jackson Pollock, he's a leftist. He's a guy who
anti-CIA probably.
Yes. And so you could use him. And I don't think he was in on this. And I don't think there was any big, hey guys, okay, Jackson, we're calling you in for a meeting and this is what we're going to, it wasn't like that at all.
He'd be a useful idiot.
Yes.
As I am, as we all are.
But what was kind of interesting was if you look at all of the people who founded the Museum of Modern Art and the foundations that were related to them, almost all of them were wartime intelligence operatives. So, they were intellectuals. They were not out there, trudging with guns through trenches. They were fighting a cultural war during the war and afterwards. And they just kind of kept doing that as they went forward. So the Museum of Modern Art formed what was called the International Program. And that International Program sort of took money and funneled it into these different organizations that then put on shows by Pollock. So what I ended up finding with my painting that I was looking at was, there's a pretty plausible case for this being one of those paintings that ended up going over to Europe and then ended up through Switzerland through the consul. So they were using governmental agencies like the consuls and stuff to put these shows on, to receive the paintings. And, there are like letters where somebody's like, hey, I want to know the price of these paintings that were in this show. And they're like, well, why don't you just ask the consulate? So it was very much kind of like this governmental, like, why does the consulate have the prices of these Jackson Pollock paintings that appeared in this show in Paris? And it's because they were kind of, using this soft power stuff. So I don't think it's a big cloak and dagger, spy kind of situation, but I think it's just another one of these kind of soft power governmental things. But what I found, the thing's kind of interesting is there is a very plausible case for this painting. And I, as a person who likes evidence, goes, that's great. I can make up a story about anything. But now let's go take a look at this, at the actual, what paint is there? Is this wood from the period? Is this paint real? Because the one thing that's cool about Jackson Pollock is that somebody had the bright idea, because he painted on the floor. He had just unstretched canvas, just cloth on the floor, and he would drip paint on the floor and use sticks and things to kind of spatter paint and whatever. The studio has all kinds of paint on the floor.
Right.
So a few years ago, somebody went, took samples of all that paint, and did what's called
on the floor.
Yeah.
Oh, his studio is still intact.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So they went and they took all those paint samples, and they did what's called Raman spectroscopy. It's an imaging thing that gives you basically signatures of elements. So you can go,
the chemical makeup or whatever.
Correct. So you can go, okay, well, this paint in this painting that I'm looking at has the exact same paint as the paint that's on the studio floor. And they also did that analysis on a couple of known Pollock paintings. So one of them is called Alchemy 1A. Yeah,
Whoa.
there you go.
That's wild,
Yes.
dude.
So you can do that. So I have been working with a well-known university laboratory that does kind of Nobel level research, not related at all to art, because I wanted to go to a place that did not deal with art, because for a lot of reasons.
Yes.
One of them being that it's my impression that you can, in some places, buy the result you want. So I didn't want to have any bias or any, kind of previous knowledge or any, these people don't care about this. It's an art thing. It's interesting to them, but it's not what they do. So they can look at it in a dispassionate way. And much to my surprise, at every step, it kind of keeps going forward. Yes, it matches the paint. Does the blue match? Yeah, the blue matches. Does the red match? Yeah, the red matches. It matches the floor and it matches Alchemy 1A or whatever. And so you keep going forward, and then, you do this radiocarbon dating.
Yeah.
So, and the thing that's interesting about radiocarbon dating is that because there was a lot of nuclear testing starting in the late 50s and into the 60s, there's a very specific signature from that blast of stuff that was, it's not present in stuff that started, that came earlier.
Interesting.
So if you do radiocarbon and you're looking for isotope 14, carbon 14, if you're looking for carbon 14 and it's not there, then it probably predates. And then they stopped atmosphere.
Anything?
Yeah.
Like anything?
Most stuff, I think.
Wow.
Again, no expert, but you can do it on paint. You can do it on linen. You can do it on the wood of the stretcher bars and stuff. But what's also interesting is that you can, because they then stopped testing, it kind of died off, right? So depending on where that level of carbon 14 is, you can sort of say, well, I think that's probably 1962 to 1964. In our case, the painting is, supposedly from 48, 49. So if you find evidence of lots of nuclear testing, couldn't have been, right? Because that would have been after. So it's really interesting that you can do all of these things, whereas before you would just kind of say, as an expert, yes or no. Now you can actually do all of these things, which are, kind of irrefutable science. So I went and I did all the stuff that I know about. And, yes, this kind of makes sense. Here's all this evidence. Here's notes saying that these paintings were sent from France to Switzerland. They were sent to the consulate and all this kind of stuff. That gets you somewhere there, right? But then when you really look at the paint and all that other stuff, that's kind of where the rubber hits the road. But, and here's art. Here's where art is interesting. A lot of people will tell you, like, that's all well and good. That's fine. However, if the experts with connoisseurship, their eye, don't like it, good luck. Good luck.
Really?
Despite having all the evidence.
No matter how much scientific data you have.
Good luck.
You have to have the people connected to the institutions.
Yeah. And
give you the nod.
Yeah. And also because I think part of that is, I think it's good to have like all of it. But I think there's also some reluctance on the part of some institutions to say, like, yes, okay, you did not use us in any part of this, or you did not sort of get our okay. So therefore we are withholding it. And then there's a lot of other stuff, like famously the Warhol Foundation. How can I say this without getting sued? There are foundations, not necessarily the Warhol Foundation, but there are foundations that are charged with verifying and authenticating paintings. So you'll give them a painting and you sign a paper which says, hey, you give us this painting, you want us to authenticate it. If we don't think it's real, you authorize us to destroy it. And you got to sign that. If you don't sign that, they won't even look at it. So, it's a little bit of a risk to take. And there is very often, controversy about this stuff. So there are foundations where the people who make up the foundation may never have been close to the artist. They maybe own a bunch of the work, but they didn't know the artist. They weren't around during the artist's time or just at the very end of the artist's life. And they're refusing to authenticate stuff by people who were collaborators of the artist or, worked with them or were around. And they go, yeah, I had this painting. It was given to me by so-and-so, and it 100% looks real, everything real, but they don't like it because, well, we own all these pieces, and if now there's a whole bunch of work coming from here, it devalues our stuff. So there's a lot of funny business.
So if I pay $100,000 for a Jackson Pollock painting and I want to send it to the Jackson Pollock Institute for them to verify if it's real or not, I have to sign a piece of paper that says if they determine it's not real, they can destroy it.
I don't think the Jackson Pollock. Well, there is no Jackson Pollock Foundation.
Well, like this is like for any artist, like this is
Chagall for
hypothetical.
sure. Chagall for sure.
Really?
If you send it to Comité Chagall, you have to sign a paper that says if we feel it's not real, we will destroy it, and you have to be okay with that.
Oh my God! Imagine the level of corruption that goes on with that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that there is any, but there could be. There might be. There is that potential.
Yeah.
I don't know that there is, but
yeah. Somebody was explaining to me how there was this gets into the whole the thing about like how you were explaining earlier when there is like extreme utility in doing a photo or a portrait of somebody because you can't take photos. The person who can do it the most accurate, that would be the most valuable piece of artwork. But now like there is no utility in something like that, right? Like especially with AI. And there was I think it was a Warhol documentary where they literally had an AI narrate the whole documentary as if it was Andy Warhol in his voice.
Yes.
That's creepy.
That's correct. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of other AI work that's happening now. So you can train. There were two examples that I know about that were pretty interesting. And the first one was there's an artist called Egon Schiele, Austrian artist in the early 1900s. He had these beautiful pencil drawings, really, really amazing artist. But they trained a neural network to look at, there wasn't even a very big number of his drawings, but they trained it to look at these drawings, and then it could, with 99.99% accuracy, determine whether something was drawn by Egon Schiele or not, by the pressure on the pencil, a million different sort of like inputs. So it could do that. And that's, one of the other reasons why it is so difficult for somebody like Tony to do what he did now. I mean, he says that's over.
Well, and also in today's day and age, there's also no more, who are the Picassos or the Pollocks of now, right? Like that doesn't seem to exist anymore. I
mean, there are definitely contemporary artists that you and I have never heard of.
Mm-hmm. That in 100 years, people are going to be like, oh my God, like
that. I mean, that's hard to say. But
during this time when AI was ubiquitous, like how much more difficult is that going to be?
Yeah, I mean that's hard to say. So there's a bunch of attention that's being paid now to what can we do to make sure that the holes and gaps of the past don't exist anymore. So there are companies that, allow you to put DNA in a painting, or, microchip and catalog paintings from the second they were born to whatever. So there's all kinds of stuff, blockchain certification for stuff like that. So that happens. There are definitely artists that you and I have never heard of who are huge, huge names if you are in that world, that we don't know about, and they're painting and stuff is worth millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Which of those are going to last, beyond their lifetime? I don't know. Beyond 2 or 3 lifetimes, I don't know either. But there's another interesting AI thing that I read about, which was amazing, and that is there is an AI that can kind of look at oil painting. Some oil painting, like, Dali had very thin, almost transparent painting style, but some is thick, and they just kind of glob it on and stuff. But these AIs can look at like a 3D map of the painting, and it's so good that with certain painters that it has been trained on, you can kind of start to tell the difference between brush strokes by the student and brush strokes by the master. So a lot of in the Renaissance and even later in the Baroque period, you would have a studio. So you'd go to the master and you'd say, "Hey, I want a painting of my wife, the Duchess of whatever." And he'd say, "Great." And he'd have 10 paintings going at the same time, and he'd kind of sketch it out, draw the composition, and then the students would paint in the costume and the legs and stuff, and the master would do the hands, which are very hard to do, and the face. So this AI can tell the difference between the various strokes, which is, pretty amazing. There's just so much you can do now that it's quite difficult to really tell the difference, or to really fool technology, all the chemical analysis, all the spectroscopic analysis and everything. You just
Yeah, I wonder, like, why was the Renaissance the period of time when we had the most, like, insane amount of art coming out? Not just art, like architecture, all these cathedrals that were built. Like, it just seems like an absorbent amount of creativity was coming out during that time. And, like, people were creating stuff. I'm guessing that people were doing this stuff not just as like a thing for a return on investment. They weren't doing this because it was going to make them money. They were creating this stuff because something else was going on in society that was promoting, like, just a crazy amount of creativity, like whether was it the climate. I'm sure the climate, the economy, like the religious culture that was going on. I'm sure there were so many elements that were contributing to that. But it's just interesting how that period in history was just known for so much amazing art.
Yeah, the very short answer is the church and the Counter-Reformation. So you had the church, vastly wealthy, who wanted to the Reformation said, "Hey, you can have a personal one-on-one relationship with God through your own reading of the Bible." And the Catholic Church said, "Well, yeah, that's all good, but there also needs to be a hierarchy, and we are the institution on earth which is kind of mediating between the two." So they wanted to bring these stories to the common person through the church, through painting. They wanted to illustrate it. Here's the story of St. Matthew. And you could make the argument that essentially these were comic books, graphic novels of their time for people to look at. And there was a tremendous amount of money available to do this. And, in the book, Con Artist that I wrote with Tony, he talks a lot about how Caravaggio's his favorite artist, but like when Caravaggio came to Rome, it was like Hollywood was in the 50s or whatever. It's like every artist, every person, everybody who wanted to be a director went to LA, went to Hollywood.
Yeah.
Everybody who wanted to be an architect or an artist or a sculptor or whatever went to Rome, because that's where all the commissions were coming from the church. They were building these massive cathedrals, building churches, decorating them, chapels, everything.
Right. Yeah. And I think Leonardo da Vinci, he was also, like, if I remember correctly, he was doing all kinds of things like developing things for war, like weapons and stuff for war and stuff like this, and like being commissioned to do stuff. Like, I mean, I guess a lot of it was just he was just trying to feed himself.
Yeah, I mean, they like some Da Vinci. I'm not as familiar with his life because I want to stress that I'm not a great art expert,
Right.
But I do know a little bit. But yes, I mean, he was. Some people would argue that he was an engineer first,
Right.
and an artist after. So he famously came up with designs for like helicopter screws and flying machines and different catapults and instruments of war, like you say. And so when I talk to Tony always says that he was just as a boy just fascinated with the notebooks of Da Vinci and was actually more interested in Da Vinci the engineer than Da Vinci the artist, because he wasn't actually a very prolific artist. He worked really, really, really slowly. So it'd take him years to make paintings, months and months and months to make paintings, whereas Caravaggio would make like literally a painting in a day, because when he first came to Rome, he was, like imagine a 22-year-old person going to Hollywood because they want to be a director.
Yeah.
The same kind of thing. And so he got a job painting essentially like tourist postcards, and he'd have to paint like these heads, one in a day, or fruit. His job was to paint fruit, still lives. And so he'd do one in a day, and that's how he would, he'd make a penny or whatever.
Wow.
And he lived with this guy, Monsignor Del Monte, and he called him Monsignor Salad, because he said that all he ever fed him was salad.
Really?
Yeah, he was just like, he was the literal starving artist. Wow. But that's what, that was the climate of the Renaissance. And that kind of points out, that for everything that we say about, the evils of the art market and, all this stuff, you must have patrons. You must have people who are interested in having art and want to pay for it or feel it's important enough in their lives that it's a priority for them to spend money on. Otherwise, no art.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have the person who's commissioning stuff.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it is really interesting how it's evolved, especially like what we were talking about with the Cold War and art and the CIA trying to, through like second and third hand people, fund these artists and prop up this industry of art, of modern art, and to just basically like show that, hey, we're all about liberty and creativity and openness, and like we're so much better than the Soviet Union. And like, yeah, there was no like victims or anything. They weren't like kidnapping and torturing people. They were just spending taxpayer dollars on trying to drive culture and show how much better we were. And that was during the whole like McCarthy area too, right? So like,
I mean, that's why they had to use the CIA, because they had the first couple of shows. I forget what it was called. I think it was called Advancing American Art or something like that. And they bought all of these paintings from famous artists of the time.
right.
And they put them out there, and then everybody came out and said, like, this is like modern art is all communistic. This is all garbage. And Harry Truman famously said, if that's art, then I'm a Hottentot.
Right.
So,
That's art,
but you think about this, like everything that happens, basically starts with an idea. I mean, you go like, well, books don't matter, and all this kind of stuff. Well, they do, because everything starts with ideas, and that exchange of ideas is what makes like real world changes happen or things happen. So art of its time, and, depending on how you define art, I mean, what's the art of today? I mean, I don't know what you think, but, is it a painting? Probably not. Is it a TikTok video? Maybe. Is it, music? Probably. Is it a little video? Yeah, probably. Is it a meme? Yes. That's really the art of today and think about how many ideas and how much our world has changed because of ideas that we're exchanging. So art doesn't look like it used to in the past.
Right.
So what is happening now as art is probably not even what we recognize.
Well, it's interesting how it's today. It seems like it's more of like people copying things that other successful people have already done with art, right? Like they'll see a model and say, I can copy this and do this in maybe a little bit of a different way. It's a successful model. It makes a lot of money. Maybe it'll make me famous. So I can do this and put my own spin on it or whatever. It's less like unique, new, super creative, right? It's more of like copy and paste nowadays.
Yeah, I mean that's true because it's possible to do that, but I mean I think that kind of, I don't know, call it inspiration if you want, or call it straight up copying. I mean, there are, the great old masters would, there's always this, I don't know if it's an argument, but discussion. Who's the greatest painter? Was it oil painter? Was it Caravaggio or was it Rembrandt? Well, maybe it's Rembrandt, but there could have been no Rembrandt without Caravaggio.
Right.
And there's all kinds of examples of, look at any period. People happen to be doing stuff that kind of looks very similar. It's just the way it is. There are ideas in the air. Oh, I saw him do that. Let me try that too, or whatever. It's kind of the way it is. It is true now that though, you can sample a hook out of a song, which you weren't able to do in the past, but you sample it and you just stick it in your song.
Yes.
And that's what drives your song. And then you do some other crap on top of it. But, really what drives your song is that sample or, whatever. That was not possible before. It's not possible to cut and paste.
We had this gentleman on the other day, Mike Benz, who was explaining to us, he used to work for the State Department in the cyber division. And he was explaining to us how the State Department, basically, like the State Department was the department in the United States that will do all the things that this is too dirty for the CIA to do. And he was explaining how they were basically doing the same thing you're explaining with the modern art movement during the Cold War with music in like the last 10, 20 to 30 years. And they were doing this thing called music diplomacy, where they were like funding musicians, funding artists, funding music festivals in different countries to overthrow governments or to like push political agendas all over the world. It's crazy with jazz. I think one of the original ones was jazz. I think what he was explaining was like, maybe this was like even during the Cold War when I think it was like Stalin was trying to say that like America and the West were super racist, right? So we came in and we funded this jazz diplomacy, right? To show that no, we're not.
Yeah,
like we have all this jazz and all this stuff, all these black musicians all over the place, and it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, it makes total sense. It's famously in the 50s, Khrushchev came to America. Soviet ruler Khrushchev came to America. And he was shown around and saw like a Western, the kitchen of the future or whatever. And it's just mind blowing, So if you have all of these things like, hey, for young people who are going to affect the most change, anyway, now they're really into rock and roll. How are you going to keep those people interested in, Soviet realism or whatever when you got the Beatles, So whatever that thing is. But I mean, art has that ability, and it has always had that ability. And I think one of the difficult things in dealing with art is that the experience of most art is off-putting. How many people really look forward to going to a museum? How many people really look forward to that? And part of that is just
my mom's the only one I know.
I mean, I was just talking to somebody else and they were like, they're a great outdoors person. And they're like, we went climbing in Italy, and they're like, the only thing is I don't want to go to I don't want to go to any museums, and I kind of get that, because there's this kind of like overwhelming solemnity to a lot of it, or just like I don't get it. So it's easy to sort of look
aspect to it all.
Yeah, and it's really easy to look at it and go like, I don't really see how this applies to my life.
Right.
I don't see how this applies to my life. Whereas, when you look at art as kind of like all the music and ideas and imagery and stuff that we see every day, then you see it as part of your life. And I think that's kind of one of the things, like I'm not super interested in the like late Warhol, where it's just like, here's a bunch of pictures of Liz Taylor. Here's 100 images of Liz Taylor or Chairman Mao or whatever. But, if you read his early notebooks and stuff, I mean, it's super fascinating. And what he was saying, which nobody understood at the time, like, well, what does that even mean? Everybody's in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. Like, what does that mean? We know what it means now. I mean, that's social media.
Right.
That was 50 years before social media. That's amazing, So it's really kind of about like, how do the ideas, the imagery, the music, the ways that people think kind of influence your life? I think that's what art is. It might not look like it might not be a piece of canvas on a wall.
Yeah, I think it's cool, because it's like taking a time machine back, and seeing like, what like you said, like what was going through people's minds back then. How were they thinking? What was it like just to be in like that museum surrounded by all this ancient shit? Is like, it's weird. It gives you it's like, it's not just seeing it. It's this sort of like a feeling you get, you know what I mean? Where it's kind of a feeling you don't forget when you get to experience some sort of history like that, and a little glimpse into the past.
Yeah. And I had one of the, like, this really great art experience in a way that I hadn't in a long time in a museum. I was at the Getty Center, not the Villa. I was at the Getty Center, and I was there. I took somebody for their birthday to this cafe to hang out. It's a nice place to stay. But I said, well, let's run up and go look at a couple of paintings. And usually, you sort of walk through and, I like that, or I look at a few things. But I stopped and I looked at this Monet haystack. There's these famous haystack paintings. And I kind of looked at it. I started looking at it. And it turned into, I mean, it sounds goofy, but it turned into, like those magic eye paintings.
Yeah.
It kind of had this magic eye effect.
Interesting.
And I was like, wow. So this was kind of like how using Impressionism, he had found a way to show how light, a flat surface could become 3D, and not just in kind of like straight line perspective, like Renaissance paintings, but how this impressionistic thing could make this thing become a 3D real thing. And that's amazing for the time. We kind of become blind to these things because we see it all the time. We have all kinds of imagery and effects and optical illusions and things. But that to me was like truly an amazing thing.
That is fascinating. I read this thing about Picasso, about how he was so good at purveying like he was really good at displaying depth, because allegedly he could only see in 2D. So allegedly, like, he had, I don't know if this is for sure, but allegedly he had like one eye that went really far out and he couldn't see depth very good.
Oh.
So he relied a lot on light and shadows and things to discern depth. And he was really good at translating this into a canvas, into turning something that was 2D into something 3D. What is this AI? Yes, Picasso's right eye showed signs of strabismus, a condition of misaligned eyes with poor depth perception. So because he had poor depth, he couldn't see space. He had to figure out ways to get through the world using light and shadows and shapes to discern depth. And he was like, that's a fascinating thing about how he was able to make his paintings. And this is also true with filmmakers too. There's this famous documentarian named Errol Morris, who I has the same issue, and he has this incredible way of doing cinematography. He even invented this thing called the Interatron during his documentaries, where the person's looking straight down the barrel of the camera. So instead of like sitting to the side and having the person look off camera, they look straight down the barrel. He would put this mirror in front of his face so they could see his face. They would talk to him, but somehow it would like reflect into the lens, so like they're looking straight down the barrel of the camera. So like, it's just weird. It's just interesting to hear how like certain people's like disabilities or shortcomings can translate into like something incredible in art. Yeah, there it is. There's the Interatron right there.
The Interatron.
I love it. I love it. I mean, you know, you're a documentary guy. You know, it's always like one of these things where if you're doing the interview, you always have to like stand right next to the camera.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you have to tell the person like, look in my. It's never quite there. So I like that. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's always like
Great
it's always
filmmaker.
interesting to me when somebody can come along and like innovate a new way of creating something, like a new medium, not necessarily a new medium, but a new way to like an example would be like podcasting, how like Joe Rogan basically was the first one. I mean, to have the idea to have two people just sit down and talk uninterrupted, unedited for hours and put it out there. And who knew it would be like the number one thing that everyone listens to in the world. Like
Incredible,
anyone
right?
during that time would say, no, you have to make it more entertaining. You have to start out with like a hook that grabs people, and you know, it has to be shorter. You're going to lose people's attention. But like, no, it just blew that out of the water.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Picasso was interesting too, because, you know, you can always, you can think about how the great artists just have kind of a different way of looking. They bring a new way of looking at something. And so I think that, you know, what you described about his eyes and stuff kind of tied into a bigger cultural thing at the time too, or a bigger discovery at the time. So, you know, science and philosophy thinking about like, you know, other dimensions, or the fact of looking at something changes something, and subatomic particles and all that kind of stuff. So cubism is really like, hey, when you're looking at something, you're looking at it from every direction at the same time, you know? And so I think that his way of looking probably like allowed him to see that in a way that he might not have seen.
Might not have appreciated.
Yeah.
In another.
Yeah. And it's an idea that had like greater resonance or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's super fascinating. What you did another documentary that was on Netflix that was about social media and kids, influencer kids.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that was about?
Yeah, that was called Bad Influence. And it was a documentary that was directed by Jenna Rocher and Keith Davidson. And they did a great job. I produced it. It was this look at a particular social media influencer, huge social media influencer called Piper Raquel, kind of a kid-fluencer. And what it sort of looked at was, you know, you think that there's this world it's for kids, it's harmless, it's just harmless fun. But what you really start to see is that this is a world that is not kid-friendly, that has a lot of problems inherent in it. I mean, I personally think that social media is a huge, huge problem, not just for kids, but for everybody today. I think it's completely messed up our information environment, and there's horrible information hygiene because of it. But so this was a bunch of, Piper Raquel had a squad of kids with her. They all kind of joined together and they would make prank videos and all this kind of stuff. And their Piper's mother, Tiffany Raquel, was kind of the momager of all these kids. And so it's really a story of abuse. You know, these kids were made to work all the time. They were kind of pitted against each other. They received no schooling. And, it's just this kind of like almost cult-like world in which these children fell. And again, it's one of these situations where you have that kind of money, like, a 11-year-old kid making, a couple $100,000 a month.
What?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of incentives that kind of go awry. So, I mean, I do think that generally speaking, social media is a terrible thing for children. I think that it is can be largely unhealthy for adults who can't mediate. But for kids, I mean, it's undeniable that it is designed to be addictive. That's just undeniable.
Yes.
It is unpoliced largely. And while many of the companies claim that they have the safety of children at heart, or that they have, dedicated safety teams and all this stuff, the reality is that anytime that safety or mental health butts up against, the need to have viewers and, time spent on site, that always wins out.
And please, shareholders.
Yeah. I mean, it always wins out. So, for example, one of the this is crazy to me. I have an 11-year-old daughter who does no screen time except for like on the weekend, we'll watch some movies or whatever. And it's funny because that is, that's sort of a radical thing.
Yeah.
But then I look at it and go like, I mean, really, if you understood what's going on, most parents would think like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you wouldn't give your kids cigarettes. Not giving your kids cigarettes is not a radical thing. I think not giving your kids social media is similar. So anyway, there's this very popular game called Roblox.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
familiar with it.
Roblox. Roblox is, for those who don't know, is essentially, a user-generated content. Everybody makes like little environments that you can run around in your avatar, and you buy merch and whatever. Kids as young as, I don't remember this exactly, but I think it's 13-ish. And anybody who wants to get in can get in pretty easily. But, you have 9, 10-year-old kids in some of these environments. One of the most popular environments is public restroom. So, imagine what happens in a public restroom in a club or whatever, that's all the kind of stuff that takes place in these places. And there are, I mean, many, I mean, I don't know if it's 100, but dozens of cases of grooming, where it's been described as a pedophile paradise. And every time I mention this to a, fellow parent, they go, oh yeah, my kid's on Roblox. And I go, oh really? And they go, yeah, actually my kid, somebody was trying to groom my kid on it. Like, it's so rife. It's unbelievable. And there are, dozens of cases where somebody, sets up like Jeffrey Epstein Island. There were, I think they've kind of specifically taken those out, but Jeffrey Epstein Island, where kids are running around in this Roblox thing and they're, getting kids to compromise themselves some way, or, they're kind of meeting through this and then take them offline, or take them off site to another private messaging thing.
Right.
And then they'll want to come meet him and all this stuff. And this, like, many, many examples of this happening.
Yeah.
And if you ask the company's like, oh no, we take safety very seriously. And the question is like, I'm not sure that's true. And, I think that is just repeated over and over and over again. One of the main ways that kids buy drugs now is just on social media. That's like the number one way to buy drugs. Yeah. So that Roblox example there is repeated many, many, many times. There are many cases that are being adjudicated right now. I believe there's a class action lawsuit that's being formed. And it's kind of the same thing with all of the social media sites, where they kind of have almost like a blanket immunity.
Yeah, Section 240 or 230.
Yeah. So I helped start an early internet travel company that then became part of TripAdvisor. So we're one of the first ones. And I remember at the time, we were kind of grappling with, well, how do you deal with user-generated content, right? Who's responsible for it?
Right.
What if somebody uses a picture that's copyrighted? What do you do? And what ended up happening was that the law basically just said, you are a utility. Mm-hmm. You can do more or less what you want. It's the onus is on someone to report, right? And then you have to deal with it. So for example, if somebody used copyrighted imagery, mm-hmm. okay, the photographer has to come in and go through a really onerous project to get you to remove that information. Mm-hmm. And let's say somebody took 500 photos. Well, I'm a photographer. Can I really spend all that time to go through this whole process of filling out 500 separate forms, to show you that these things have been copyright, have violated my copyright? Now, repeat that 500 times, right? How are you going to deal with that? Mm. So, what I used to do is I'd say if somebody showed me that, I'd just nuke the account. I'd just be like, good, you did a copyright violation. You're out of here. I wouldn't make the person go through all those hoops. And similarly with social media, because it's treated like a utility, despite the fact that somebody like Twitter, very openly shapes the content. I mean, the algorithm is pushing stuff to you.
Right.
These are the top stories. You should look at this. You should look at this. Mm-hmm. If you're interested in this, you're going to be interested in that. Let me push this to you. Let me push that to you. They still have no real liability mm-hmm. for any of the stuff that they're showing. So, you have this information environment where unsafe stuff or, like really radicalizing stuff is out there, and there's no repercussions because these guys are shielded.
Right.
So personally, I think it would be fairly easy to deal with that. Why, regardless of how you feel about this, but why is Fox no longer reporting that Dominion voting machines were compromised in previous election? Because they got sued for $1 billion.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That stuff is all over social media. And, there are trends and they push it and, they're making money off of that content, and lots of it. But there's really no repercussion against that because their claim is, oh, well, it's not me who's publishing it.
It's individuals.
It's individuals.
Right.
However, you are now shaping this, you're pushing it,
The thing is you have to, right. The thing is you have to prove mm-hmm. that they are specifically institutionally pushing specific narratives or specific stories, because
correct.
The ultimate way for that to work is you would have all of the people who exist on these social media platforms, dependent on how many followers they have, would have equal exposure to their content and to their stories they push out. The problem with, in my view, this mm-hmm. This Section 230 blanket immunity to lawsuits is that they can put their finger on the scale and nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
And the argument against it is like, why should social media companies get off the hook for any sort of liability when, if I make playground equipment, you're not off the hook for any kind of liability. Why do they deserve it? I get it. And the other side of the coin is if they didn't have this, they would probably go out of business.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, personally, I think it would probably be fine. I mean, as it currently exists, I think it would be fine. And I think there's a really interesting kind of legal framework that's being developed. There's a lot of kind of youth groups and stuff. There's one called Design It For Us, whose theory is, look, this is just a product liability case. In the same way that if you make a car that explodes, if you make cigarettes that are marketed at children, you can't do that. This is very specifically marketed to addict us. This is very specifically marketed there's a negligence in the way that it allows inappropriate interactions to happen and stuff like that. So for example, I'm not sure what the current status of every one of the social media thing, but default that your that your messaging is open, things like that. So most social media, the default is anybody can contact you, let's say, right? Whereas it should be like nobody can contact you unless, parental intervention happens.
Right. Right.
So,
or another argument that people make is that there shouldn't be any anonymity on social media. Like it should be your name connected to your social security number or whatever it is, so that if you do anything out of line, you are punished for it.
Yeah. I mean, that seems a little too far for me. And I kind of feel like, well, everybody's like, well, that'll change everything, or this.
Right. Are you going to be out there screaming obscenities at people and being, a complete asshole to everybody online if everybody knows who you are?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, this kind of already exists. This is not like some crazy notion. The crazy notion is the opposite, whereby, hey, you get a blanket immunity. Like, wait a minute, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Because you could make this, it already works for media. I know when I make a documentary, I make a spreadsheet with every claim. Every claim I make a spreadsheet, and I go, here's source 1, here's source 2, and here's source 3. And then claim number 2. I mean, that spreadsheet's long. And that's a hard process to do, but that's kind of the hoop that I have to jump through, to show, to really kind of like shore up all my claims. And if I can't defend my claim, I'm not going to make it, So that's kind of what I have to go through. And similarly, media, if New York Times publishes something, you go, well, it's a columnist. Well, sorry, that's your columnist. You published it in your platform, you are liable. In the same way that, I'm sure you could have a method by which you could say, like, for example, the Dominion story. All right, X, you are pushing this to people. We've shown that this has no merit, yet you're pushing this to people in your algorithm. Okay, so either stop pushing it in the algorithm, right? Remove it from whatever,
right, or
face some of the liability,
right. But do we know that is it a fact? Do we know that X or Twitter is giving that Dominion story more favorable push in the algorithm? Are they pushing it any more than other stuff? And shouldn't people be allowed to talk about shit, whether it's fake, real, a lie, propaganda? Shouldn't all speech on these things have equal push or equal availability to see, right? Instead of like, can you prove that they're pushing that more than the alternate story? Because I agree with you that that's wrong. But like, conversely, it should be a place where bad ideas should have just as much reach as good ideas should have.
Yes and no. In my opinion, I mean, this is all just our opinion.
Right.
In my opinion, of course, you should be able to have your idea. I should be able to talk to you about, lawful ideas. I shouldn't be able to say like, hey, you and I are going to murder Steve.
Right.
But although you may want to sometime. But you can have that conversation. Of course you can. But the difference is, should you amplify that? Can you amplify that? That's my way of looking, and it's fairly practical, right? If there's 3 guys with no followers talking about it, okay, it's not a problem. Don't worry about it, right?
Well, the thing is, isn't that a slippery slope when you have the platform deciding what should be squashed or what should be amplified when you're giving them that power?
But I don't think the platform, the platform, first of all, platforms are private companies. They're private companies.
Totally.
Okay. So like when we had our website, which was a huge community, right, of user generated content, I could remove you anytime I wanted to, just because you were a jerk, you were unkind, you were using copyrighted imagery, you used copyrighted text. I could do that.
Right.
So they can do that. And that's the prerogative of a private company. Okay. Should they do it or how do they do it? I think is kind of like, to my mind, slightly more difficult than dealing with the media. I mean, we have libel lawsuits, right? All the time. We know what that means. We know what that looks like. We know how that's adjudicated. It's not some great giant unknown. We already know how to do it. Just kind of do that, because I think the downside is so much worse. I mean, I really think that we're in a terrible situation where it's very difficult to deal with any problems because of the fact that we are so unable to find a non-radicalized middle ground on anything. So that's
the biggest problem right there. You just nailed that. The people, the ideas that get the most attention on social media are the most extreme ones.
And that's algorithmic.
Yeah.
That is algorithmic. That is purely pushed by an algorithm, which is based upon creating dopamine hits and views.
Yeah, you're not going to grow your followers by having a nuanced, middle of the road opinion.
Exactly. So there is. I don't know if you've ever heard of the doomsday clock. The doomsday clock was created in the 80s by an organization of atomic scientists. And it was a metaphor for talking about how much in danger were we of nuclear apocalypse.
Oh, yes.
Okay? So they go, it's 11:59 and 58 seconds. And they would occasionally sort of, so there you go. So it's very close. And right now it's like, basically any moment we're going to have a nuclear apocalypse. But they have also started
So right now in 2025, they think it's a high probability that we're going to have a nuclear...
89 seconds to midnight. Again, it's a metaphor. For saying midnight is nuclear apocalypse. So they're saying we are very close to...
It's a metaphor. They're not necessarily saying like thermonuclear bombs.
No.
Right.
They're saying it's a metaphor for the danger we have of nuclear apocalypse happening. So it's not going to happen in 89 seconds, but in this metaphor, we're very close and we have a very high level of danger. So I talked to one of the chief scientists there, and they've expanded to some other areas like climate change, political instability and stuff. And one of the things that they talk about is information hygiene or information environment. How bad is the information that we get now? When every single sort of like
Steve,
crazy.
Can you turn that off? I'm freezing my ass off, dude. That thing is fucking, that thing is freezing me. Or just turn it down a little bit.
When every single piece of information is disagreed upon in the most radical terms, you cannot solve any of these problems.
Right.
So we talked to them and they just basically said, unless we solve, and they were very specifically talking about X, because that was just part of the conversation. But when you can't have the discussion or there is no viable objective fact anywhere, you can't solve any of this.
Right.
And so therefore, to me, it seems to me that the greatest problem that we face today and the greatest opportunity for positive change is to kind of just like pull back from that, and it's not like before social media, we still had freedom of expression. We still had the ability to get ideas out. We did not have giant psyops operations from foreign governments in every single person's brain at all times, which is happening today.
Well,
maybe we did. I mean,
well, we had 4 major news outlets.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And we know for a fact that there were CIA operations to manipulate the media, and everyone was getting their information from 4 mainstream outlets. So it was so much easier to propagandize people and sow discourse and narrative.
True.
Which I'm not saying, to your point, for a stable society, maybe that's the better way to do it.
Yeah.
But
I'm not even saying return to that. What I'm saying is let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let them all bloom, but just have them sort of operate under the same terms of, you can't just say anything about anybody anytime you want with total impunity. You can't say that you are a vampire, eating children in the basement of a pizza establishment, without facing some controversy. And you can't boost that, as the number one topic of your thing without facing some, can you prove it? Great. Report away. I mean, that's reporting. Report away,
Yeah. And the question also goes to what can they suppress? What kind of information can we suppress? And look, that was one of the biggest controversies, which I think was the catalyst to this stuff starting to go downhill at an exponential rate, was during COVID.
Yeah.
Because we had social media companies censoring all kinds of things on COVID. Doctors getting kicked off social media, losing their livelihood for saying, hey, this is not the same thing I'm seeing in my practice. People getting kicked off for questioning vaccines. Can you see how that could go the wrong way very, very quickly when you have
100%.
the people who are funding these companies, and I mean, even mainstream media companies, incentivized to take people off that aren't going with the financial incentive that might not be the right thing for the people. And there's this great account on X. I wish I remember what the guy's name was, but I'm sure you've seen these videos. There's videos where they've stitched together newscasts from all these local news sites during the COVID era and after, all these local news stations, where they're literally saying the same lines verbatim.
Yeah.
You want to talk about pushing a narrative? Is this just a coincidence that these people are using the exact same words, 8 words in a row, talking about certain things? That's insane.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if this is it, Steve. No, there was something on X that was they were talking about on all different topics, on topics regarding war, regarding COVID, regarding elections, and all this stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely danger of groupthink. There's definitely dangers of narratives being pushed if you have a small number of outlets. So again, I mean, I'm saying, have as many as you want.
Yeah.
Just have them also be liable, for the same standards.
Yeah.
Because we're pretending that this is just a guy saying some stuff, but it's not. It's not a guy saying some stuff. This is now the main source of news. It's algorithmically manipulated. It's it's.
Is this it? Here, see if you can hear it. Give it some volume. They were gonna get to it? No. All right, this isn't the video. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Actually, and this gentleman that we had on the other day too was also laying out all of these companies that they were funded by the State Department, AI companies creating this spider web, this algorithmic spider web of keywords. And they had literally there was like video conferences of people that were a part of these think tanks, these government think tanks, talking about how we need to censor these narratives. Anyone who discusses COVID-19, discusses Pfizer or Moderna or anything like this, like take these people down, suppress their accounts. And they had these like, and it covered all kinds of topics, this crazy spider web. And this was funded by the State Department, CIA, DOD, to literally clamp down on speech on the internet. And like, this isn't the type of stuff that's like protect your kids or like stop the crazy person from breaking into your house or burning down your house or whatever. This is the type of topic where the only purpose of it is to protect institutions, right? And to protect the profits of large companies.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think, yes, you're right, that there is potential to push narratives or suppress narratives, right? So my thing is, we're just in a place where we can't have problem solving. It's basically impossible. Just, like those scientists were saying, we can't really solve anything because all we do is like, it's 100% this way and it's 100% this way. There's no in between. We can't meet anywhere. Right. So, I mean, I think there's already a structure that works. The news media already works. You can report on anything you want so long as you have some support for it, or you kind of face repercussions in a court of law. I mean, that just works. You're going to say this. Okay. I mean, I can't say that I can't go and publish to the world that you are a pedophile. I can, but then I am liable for repercussions.
Of course.
So in the same way,
you are not the platform.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. But on a platform, I could have 1 million AI bots, put it out there. I could push that.
Yep.
And
as countries do.
Yeah. And I'm not liable in any way. Whereas if you said like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to sue you for this because it's untrue, you must remove it or face repercussions.
Right.
I mean, that just seems like a natural and normal process that happens in the real world today.
There is a process on YouTube where this is very easy to do. And I've been a part of it.
Yeah.
And where if somebody does do this, steals your material or posts abusive content or things that you believe are untrue, there's a button right there on the YouTube video where you can report it to YouTube. It sends YouTube stays out of it. It's directly between you and that creator, where you type up a little paragraph on what you think happened. That gets sent directly to the person who published it. And they have something like 20 days to either remove the content or, and if they don't do it, then you basically have to like file a lawsuit against them and the stuff gets taken down. And then when the courts determine the outcome, they notify YouTube, and then YouTube will make its determination on that. Yeah.
I mean, it's really a case of the stakes. Right. So in this case, YouTube has 0 stake. Your person probably has 0 stake as well, right? Because they've got 20 days. For 20 days, this material could go viral. And then, okay, I'll take it down. No,
it goes down for that 20-day period. It's down.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think that there are probably structures. I think demonstrably they're incredibly ineffective right now. I mean, I think we can kind of assume that. But to me, it's the biggest challenge that we are facing. And the documentary that we did, Bad Influence, was kind of one view into what one part of that world kind of looks like. And, there was this really interesting thing. Like, so this was a girl who at the beginning was, I want to say 10 years old when she started, and now, I mean, this is like, you can see the algorithm pushing the behavior and the content. So as she got a little bit older, everything became more sexual because it gets more. So at 16, you know, she is now she was kind of demonetized by YouTube. But then she's on a thing called BrandArmy, was on a thing called BrandArmy. And BrandArmy was unbelievable to me because in order to be a creator on BrandArmy, you could be 13. Okay. So you can be 13 and be a creator. You must be 18 to be a consumer. So de facto, you have adults consuming minor content, right? And this minor content took the form of, in the case of Piper, you know, private subscriber only hot tub shoots, you know, and this is like a 16-year-old girl. You know, all kinds of bikini shoots, all this kind of stuff. You could DM this person, all this stuff. And I go, how is this possible? You know, how is this okay? And you know, somehow.
Is this still their policy?
I think that you know, when I talked to the founder, the CEO, he sort of said, yeah, it's such a big pain for us. We're going to stop accepting this. But really it was kind of like, it just felt like, really it was just more hassle than it was worth, was kind of what he was telling me.
Right.
It's more hassle than it was worth. But I mean, that's the kind of thing where you sort of go like, how is this okay? How is this not better? How is this not better known? How is this sort of, you know, just sliding by?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that's crazy. That should absolutely
never
be allowed.
And I think that that's pretty much how, for kids anyway, I mean, let's leave adults aside for now, but for kids, that is the world that, you know, is social media.
And it's crazy too, just the culture we live in, because you have the most children today, young kids, say when you ask them what they want to do when they grow up, they want to be a YouTuber or a TikToker or something like this. Yeah.
I mean, and I tell parents, and the thing is that parents even well-intentioned parents, you know, don't realize this. They go, well, that's kids, right? That's YouTube Kids, or that's whatever. That's a kid's game. And, you know, but anything that has messaging, I go, here's what you just did. You gave your kid a phone. You published their private phone number on the internet, and you allowed anybody anywhere in the world who wants to have private conversations with them. Would you be okay with that? I doubt it.
No.
I mean, I doubt it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you've allowed, you know. And it's a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing. As you got kids, you know, it's a very difficult thing to say to your kid, you know, everybody in my class has a phone. Sorry, you're not going to get a phone.
Right.
You know, you can have there's this thing called Tin Can. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's basically a Wi-Fi version of a landline. So you can't text, you can't surf the internet, you can't do anything other than make phone calls. Right. So you want to talk to your friends? Awesome. Be my guest. Call your friend, chat, whatever you want. That's it. That's what I did when I was growing up. That's probably what you did when you were growing up.
Right. Yeah. I would be lucky to have a pager when I was growing up.
So
it's a crazy, scary world that we're living in, and it's moving at an exponential speed. It seems like it's just the speed of the technological advancement is just going faster and faster and faster every year. I feel like I just learned about these LLMs a year ago, and now it's just like they've taken over. Yeah. They're taking over industries. They're taking over movies.
Yeah. I mean, people ask me all the time, well, what do you think, what's AI going to do to, you know, documentaries or film in general? And I don't know what you think, but to me, it seems like we're going to be in a world, not in the very distant future, where instead of going like, oh, I want to watch that film, you're going to say, okay, it's Tuesday night. I want to watch a 63-minute film.
In 5 minutes.
Well, no, I want to watch a 63-minute film. It's going to have Scarlett Johansson in it. It's going to be a romantic comedy. It takes place in Portland. It's going to involve a dog, and there's going to be some, misunderstanding about identity.
Yeah.
Go. You know.
Oh my God.
That's what. So, you and me, man, we're.
It's crazy. Have you seen the music stuff? The covers of different bands where they turn them into soul music?
No.
You haven't seen this?
I haven't.
Oh my God, Steve, pull up the soul cover band that covers like metal bands. There's a Metallica one. There's like a Limp Bizkit one. Basically they cover like all the, you could plug in this guy. There's these people on YouTube who are plugging in specific like modern songs and then turning them into like soul jazz covers.
Yeah.
And they are fantastic. Like if I had never heard that song before, I would have thought like this would have been like a top hit done by like real people. It's indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah. I mean, I personally think that, I mean, not exactly, but the Matrix-like version of a future is not, it's not science fiction. It's feasible and pretty plausible.
Yeah, I hope so, man. Well, listen, man, thank you for coming and doing this stuff and talking and explaining all this stuff to me. That the art stuff is fantastic. Oh yeah, here's the let's play Master of Puppets.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
There's no views on this.
There's a lot of these soul cover bands.
In the passion play, crumbling away. I'm your
Go like halfway into the song.
Destruction. I'm pulling your strings, twisting your mind, and smashing your dreams.
Go farther in.
Master, your life burns faster. Obey your master, master of puppets. I'm pulling your strings, twisting your mind, and smashing your dreams. Blinded by me, you can't see.
It's not bad. It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. And you're right. It is. I mean,
I would never know that
came
that
out
was
of
AI.
nowhere. Came out of nowhere.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Tell people where they can find more of your work, get your books, and listen or watch your documentaries, all that stuff.
Sure. The book is called Con/Artist, Con Artist, and it's published by Hachette. You can find it pretty much anywhere. And if you look up my name, Giampiero.com, Giampiero.com, you'll see more of the stuff that I'm working on. Bad Influence was out on Netflix. The Royal Stunt documentary should be out sometime soon.
I'm looking forward to it, man. We'll link it all below. Thanks again for your time. I appreciate
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.